Good evening, and welcome to Easy Drift Sleep. Tonight your story takes you to Esther and Mordecai, Courage in the Persian Court, a world full of quiet wonder. Before we begin, if you find rest here, subscribing means a new story is always waiting for you. Now close the day behind you, and let us begin. The sun had begun its slow, deliberate descent over the ancient city of Susa, casting long, dusty shadows across the vast palace grounds and painting the western sky in hues of soft peach and fading rose. A gentle, dry breeze, carrying the faint scent of distant desert sands and the sweeter, heavier fragrance of jasmine from the palace gardens, rustled through the date palms that lined the grand avenues. From within the thick, sun-baked walls of the royal complex, the distant, muted sounds of evening preparations could be heard, the clinking of pottery from a kitchen, the soft, rhythmic chanting of a guard on a far-off patrol, perhaps the faint, high-pitched bleating of a goat from the outer courts, all blending into a quiet symphony that lulled the city towards its twilight slumber. The air, still warm from the day's heat, was beginning to cool, inviting a sense of ease and quiet reflection as the last golden light touched the highest battlements. It was in this sprawling, magnificent city, the winter capital of the vast Persian Empire, that a man named Mordecai often found himself, his gaze frequently drawn towards the imposing, sun-drenched walls of the king's palace. He was a Jew, one of many who had been carried away from Jerusalem generations before, his family lineage tracing back to the tribe of Benjamin, to Kish, the father of Saul. His days were spent in the bustling life of the city, perhaps involved in the king's service, or simply observing the intricate dance of life around the royal gates, for he was known to sit there, among the other officials and petitioners, absorbing the rhythms of the court. His heart, however, was tethered not just to the present moment in this foreign land, but to the memory of his people, to the stories of their past, and to the quiet hope for their future. Mordecai had a young cousin, a girl named Hadassah, though he had lovingly given her the Persian name Esther, meaning star, a name that seemed to suit her quiet radiance. She was an orphan, her parents having passed away, and Mordecai had taken her into his own home, raising her as if she were his very own daughter. He had poured into her the traditions and stories of their people, teaching her the ways of their faith, instilling in her a quiet strength and a deep sense of belonging, even as they lived amidst the grandeur and sometimes bewildering customs of the Persian court. She had grown into a young woman of remarkable grace and beauty, her presence a soft light in Mordecai's life, a gentle reminder of the enduring spirit of their heritage. The empire at this time was ruled by King Ahasuerus, a powerful monarch whose dominion stretched from India to Ethiopia, encompassing 127 provinces, each with its own customs and peoples, all held together by the king's decree and the might of his vast armies. His reign was marked by moments of immense splendor and grand pronouncements, reflecting the sheer scale of his power and the opulence of his court. It was in the third year of his reign, a time when his authority was firmly established across this immense territory, that he decided to host a magnificent feast, a celebration of truly epic proportions, for all his officials and servants. This was no ordinary gathering, it was a display of the vast wealth and glory of his kingdom, a testament to the majesty of his rule. For 180 days, 6 full months, the highest nobles and princes from every province, the commanders of his armies, and the most influential men of Persia and Media were invited to witness the dazzling riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his imperial greatness. Imagine the endless procession of dignitaries arriving from distant lands, their retinues filling the roads leading to Susa, their garments reflecting the diverse cultures of the empire, their voices a murmur of anticipation. After this extended period of showcasing his power to the elite, the king then held a second, even more inclusive feast, lasting for 7 days. This one was for all the people who were present in the citadel of Susa, from the greatest to the least, a grand gesture of hospitality and generosity. This feast was held in the inner court of the king's palace garden, a space meticulously designed for beauty and pleasure, a tranquil oasis within the bustling palace complex. The decorations for this week-long celebration were beyond imagination, a feast for the eyes as much as for the palate. White and blue linen curtains, perhaps woven with intricate patterns and dyed with precious pigments, were fastened with cords of fine purple linen to silver rings and marble pillars. Imagine the soft rustle of these luxurious fabrics in the gentle breeze, creating a sense of ethereal beauty, framing the gathering like a grand outdoor hall. The couches upon which the guests reclined were made of gold and silver, gleaming softly in the sunlight, arranged upon a pavement of rare and precious stones, porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and dark blue lapis lazuli. The very ground beneath their feet was a mosaic of shimmering colors, reflecting the light and adding to the overwhelming sense of luxury. The drinks were served in vessels of gold, each one unique in its design, some perhaps encrusted with jewels, others exquisitely engraved, all differing from one another in shape and craftsmanship. The wine, the finest royal wine, flowed freely and without stint, a testament to the king's boundless generosity. The ancient Persians were known for their love of wine, and at such a royal feast, it would have been of the highest quality, perhaps from the vineyards of Shiraz, renowned even then. And in keeping with Persian custom, there was no compulsion to drink. Each guest was allowed to partake as much or as little as they pleased, a decree the king had given to all the stewards of his house, instructing them to honor each man's wishes. This was a subtle but important detail, reflecting a certain level of sophisticated hospitality, allowing guests to feel at ease rather than pressured. While King Ahasuerus was hosting his grand feast for the men, Queen Vashti, his royal consort, was simultaneously holding her own feast for the women in the royal palace itself, a separate but equally lavish affair. This was customary in Persian society, where men and women often celebrated separately, maintaining a degree of decorum and tradition. The Queen's feast would have been a vibrant gathering of noble women, their silks and jewels shimmering, their laughter and conversation echoing softly through the palace halls, a counterpoint to the more boisterous male celebration. On the 7th day of the king's feast, when his heart was merry with wine, a state often associated with heightened emotions and perhaps a loosening of judgment, King Ahasuerus, in a moment of expansive revelry, commanded 7 of his eunuchs who served in his presence, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, to bring Queen Vashti before him. His intention was for her to appear before all the assembled princes and people, wearing her royal crown, so that he might display her beauty. For she was indeed a woman of striking appearance, and the king, in his pride and perhaps a touch of inebriation, wished to flaunt her before his guests, to add her beauty to the already overwhelming spectacle of his wealth and power. The eunuchs, accustomed to carrying out the king's every whim, went to Queen Vashti with the royal command. However, to the astonishment of the king and all his court, Queen Vashti refused to come. Her refusal was not a quiet, private dissent, it was a public act of defiance, a direct challenge to the king's authority, and in the highly structured world of the Persian court, such an act carried immense weight and potential consequences. When the king heard of her refusal, he was filled with fury, his wine-induced merriment instantly turning to a burning rage. His anger, like a sudden desert storm, swept through the festive atmosphere, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. This was an unprecedented act, a queen openly defying her king before such a grand assembly. The implications were vast, threatening to undermine his authority not just in his own household, but across his entire empire. In his distress and anger, the king turned to his wise men, those who understood the times, the legal experts and interpreters of custom and law. These were the men whose counsel he relied upon for matters of state and justice, men who were intimately familiar with the laws and precedents of the Medes and Persians, laws which, once established, were said to be unchangeable. Their names were Karshina, Shetha, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had direct access to the king and held the highest positions in the kingdom. The king posed a direct question to them. According to law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti for not obeying the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs? He sought not just a punishment, but a legal justification, a way to uphold the sanctity of his royal decree and to prevent such an act from setting a dangerous precedent. It was Memucan who spoke first, his voice perhaps carefully measured, understanding the gravity of the situation and the potential ripple effects of any decision. He addressed the king and the assembled princes, stating that Queen Vashti had not only wronged the king but also all the princes and all the peoples who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. His reasoning was clear. The queen's conduct, he argued, would spread throughout all the provinces, reaching the ears of all the women, who would then begin to despise their husbands. They would say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she did not come. This, Memucan explained, would lead to widespread disrespect for husbands, from the highest noble to the humblest citizen, creating discord and instability within the very fabric of society. He painted a picture of a kingdom where women, emboldened by the queen's example, would no longer submit to their husbands, leading to domestic chaos and a breakdown of social order. His words, though perhaps exaggerated for effect, tapped into the anxieties of a patriarchal society, where the maintenance of order began in the home. Therefore, Memucan proposed a solution, a decisive action to prevent such a societal unraveling. He suggested that if it pleased the king, a royal decree should be issued from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and Medes, so that it could not be revoked. This decree would state that Vashti was never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and that the king should give her royal position to another woman who was more worthy than she. Furthermore, he advised that when the king's decree, which he would issue, was proclaimed throughout his entire vast kingdom, all women, without exception, would give honor to their husbands, both great and small. This was the ultimate goal, to re-establish and reinforce the hierarchy, to ensure that the king's authority, and by extension, the authority of all men, remained unchallenged. The proposed decree was not just about punishing Vashti, it was about sending a clear, unequivocal message to every household in the empire. The king and the princes were pleased with this counsel. Memucan's words had resonated with their own concerns, offering a seemingly logical and comprehensive solution to a deeply unsettling problem. The king acted swiftly, sending letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script and to every people in their own language. The content of these letters was stark and uncompromising, that every man should be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his own people. This decree, translated into countless languages and disseminated across an empire stretching thousands of miles, solidified the king's power and the social order he sought to maintain. After these events, as the initial fury of King Ahasuerus had subsided, and the memory of Vashti's defiance began to fade into the background of his vast court, a different emotion began to stir within him. Perhaps it was a sense of loneliness, or a quiet regret, or simply the natural human desire for companionship. He began to remember Vashti, her beauty, and what she had done, and the decree that had been issued against her. The grand feast had ended, the dignitaries had departed, and the palace, though still bustling, held a certain emptiness that her absence had created. His young men, his personal attendants who were always close by, observing the king's moods and seeking to please him, noticed this shift. They approached him with a suggestion, a way to fill the void and perhaps lift the king's spirits. They proposed that beautiful young virgins should be sought for the king throughout all the provinces of his kingdom. This was a common practice in ancient monarchies, where kings would gather women from across their lands to be part of their royal harem, a symbol of their power and a source of pleasure and companionship. Their plan was to appoint commissioners in all the provinces of the king's dominion, and these men would gather all the beautiful young virgins to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women. There, they would be given their cosmetic treatments, a long and elaborate process designed to enhance their beauty and prepare them for presentation to the king. And then, the young woman who pleased the king most would become queen in Vashti's place. This idea, practical and appealing to the king's desire for beauty and a new consort, seemed good to Ahasuerus, and he gave his approval, setting in motion a vast search across his empire. And so, the royal decree went out, carried by swift messengers to every corner of the vast Persian Empire. Commissioners were appointed, men of authority and influence, tasked with the delicate and significant duty of identifying and gathering the most beautiful young women from every province. Imagine the stir this would have caused in countless villages and towns, from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia to the distant reaches of India, from the sun-drenched lands of Egypt to the rugged mountains of Media. Families would have felt a mixture of pride and apprehension, hope and fear, as their daughters were considered for this extraordinary, life-altering opportunity. The selected young women, often taken from their homes and familiar surroundings, would have embarked on long and arduous journeys, traveling by caravan, perhaps accompanied by guards and attendants, making their way towards the glittering, distant city of Susa. Each girl, a stranger in a strange land, would carry with her her own hopes and fears, her own dreams and anxieties, as she was brought to the king's citadel, to the house of the women. It was into this unfolding drama that Esther, Mordecai's young cousin, was drawn. She was, as the text describes, a young woman of lovely form and beautiful appearance. Her quiet grace, her innate charm, and her striking beauty would have made her stand out, even among the many other beautiful girls gathered from across the empire. Mordecai, ever watchful and protective of her, found himself in a difficult position. To refuse the king's decree was unthinkable, a direct challenge to royal authority that would have brought swift and severe punishment upon them both. To comply meant surrendering Esther to an uncertain future within the complex and often dangerous world of the royal harem. Yet, he knew he had to act. When the king's command and his decree were proclaimed, and many young women were gathered to the citadel of Susa under the care of Hegai, Esther too was taken to the king's palace, to the custody of Hegai, who was in charge of the women. This was a moment of profound change for Esther, a sudden wrenching from the familiar comforts of Mordecai's home and the quiet routines of her life. She was now one among many, a potential candidate for the highest position in the empire, yet also a captive in a gilded cage. Mordecai, with a heavy heart but a clear mind, had given Esther specific instructions before she was taken away. He had told her not to reveal her people or her kindred. This was a crucial piece of advice, a protective measure in a foreign court where prejudice and suspicion could easily arise. As a Jew, Esther belonged to a minority group, often viewed with a mixture of curiosity and distrust by the dominant culture. By concealing her identity, she would avoid potential biases and allow herself to be judged solely on her own merits and character. This secrecy was a burden, a constant awareness of a hidden truth, but it was also a shield, a layer of protection in an environment where vulnerability could be exploited. Esther, with her quiet strength and obedience, did exactly as Mordecai had commanded her. She did not reveal her heritage, maintaining a careful silence about her background, blending in as much as possible with the other young women. She was a quick study, adaptable and observant, and she understood the importance of her cousin's counsel. When Esther was brought to Hegai, the eunuch in charge of the women, she found favor in his eyes. This was a significant development, for Hegai was a powerful figure within the harem, a gatekeeper to the king's presence. His approval and support could make a world of difference in the competitive and often intimidating environment of the palace. Hegai, perhaps sensing her quiet intelligence and gentle demeanor, or simply recognizing her exceptional beauty, treated her with special consideration. He quickly provided her with the necessary cosmetic treatments, the special oils and perfumes that were part of the elaborate beauty regimen for the king's potential consorts. These treatments were not just about superficial adornment, they were a long and meticulous process, designed to purify, soften, and enhance the skin, to bring out the natural radiance of the young women. Imagine the rich, fragrant oils, perhaps myrrh and frankincense, being gently massaged into the skin, the delicate perfumes, the careful attention to hair and nails, all part of a ritual that transformed these young women into visions of royal beauty. In addition to the beauty treatments, Hegai also provided Esther with her portion of food, ensuring she received the best provisions available within the harem. He also assigned her 7 choice young women from the king's palace to attend her, to be her personal maids and companions. This was a mark of particular favor, indicating that Hegai saw something special in Esther, something that set her apart from the other girls. He moved her and her attendants to the best place in the house of the women, providing her with a measure of comfort and privacy within the bustling harem. All this time, Esther continued to keep her identity a secret, just as Mordecai had instructed. She did not reveal her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to. This act of quiet obedience and discretion further solidified her position, allowing her to navigate the complex social dynamics of the harem without the added burden of revealing her Jewish heritage. Meanwhile, Mordecai, unable to be physically with Esther but deeply concerned for her welfare, would walk back and forth every day in front of the court of the House of the Women. He would linger there, his gaze fixed on the palace walls, seeking any news, any sign, any whisper that might tell him how Esther was faring. He longed to know of her well-being, to understand what was happening to her in that grand, mysterious place. His heart was heavy with worry, yet filled with a quiet hope that she would be safe, that she would somehow thrive amidst the challenges. He was a constant, silent presence, a steadfast anchor in the storm of her new life, his unspoken love and concern reaching out to her across the palace walls. He would listen to the murmurs of the guards, the chatter of servants, hoping to catch any snippet of information, any hint about the girls in Hegai's care, and most especially about his beloved Esther. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, each passing moment a testament to his enduring devotion and his quiet anxiety for her fate within the opulent, yet isolating, world of the Persian court. The sun would rise and set, painting the palace in gold and crimson, and Mordecai would be there, a solitary figure, a silent guardian, his thoughts always with the young woman who carried the secret of their people within her heart, waiting for the day she would be called before the king. Waiting for the day she would be called before the king. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, each one marked by the slow, deliberate turning of the sun across the vast Persian sky, casting long, shifting shadows across the meticulously carved stone of the palace at Susa. The air, at first crisp with the lingering chill of winter, gradually warmed, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant, earthy aroma of the river Caspi's, winding its way through the fertile plains. Within the women's quarters, a world apart from the king's bustling court, Esther, known there as her Dossa, lived among the many other young women gathered from across the sprawling empire, each one a potential queen, each one undergoing a year-long process of purification and beautification. This was not a swift, superficial preparation, but a deeply ingrained cultural ritual, a testament to the Persian reverence for luxury and refinement, designed to present each woman in the most exquisite possible light to the great king. For 6 full months, the women were anointed daily with oil of myrrh, a rich, resinous balm with a deep, earthy, slightly bitter fragrance that clung to the skin, softening it, preparing it, and imparting a subtle, exotic perfume. This wasn't merely cosmetic. Myrrh was prized throughout the ancient Near East for its antiseptic and healing properties, believed to purify and protect. Imagine the quiet mornings, the gentle hands of the attendants, the slow, rhythmic motions as the oil was massaged into skin, the air thick with its distinctive scent, mingling with the faint aroma of cedar from the wooden chests and the sweet, clean smell of freshly laundered linen. The days would pass in a quiet routine, punctuated by lessons in courtly etiquette, the soft rustle of silk as they moved, the distant, muffled sounds of the palace beyond their secluded courtyard. After these 6 months of myrrh, another 6 months followed, dedicated to anointing with sweet spices and other preparations specifically chosen for women, a blend of fragrant oils and perfumes that would have varied from delicate floral notes to warmer, spicier undertones, each one carefully selected to enhance natural beauty and leave a lasting, enchanting impression. Perhaps there were unguents made from rose petals, or infusions of cinnamon and cassia, or perhaps the rare and precious spikenard, brought from distant lands, its scent both earthy and deeply aromatic. The women would spend hours in these preparations, their bodies becoming canvases for the most luxurious treatments known to the ancient world, their hair meticulously braided and adorned, their skin polished to a soft sheen. The air in their chambers would have been a constant symphony of perfumes, a rich, layered tapestry of scents that spoke of wealth, of care, and of the immense expectations placed upon them. During this long year, Esther, guided by the quiet wisdom of Hegai, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the women, remained steadfast in her obedience to Mordecai's earlier instruction. She revealed nothing of her people or her family. Hegai, a man accustomed to the intricate politics and subtle nuances of the court, a man whose life was dedicated to the king's pleasure and the smooth running of the royal household, had taken a particular liking to Esther. Perhaps it was her quiet grace, her unassuming demeanor amidst the more overt ambitions of the other women, or perhaps it was a certain inner strength that shone through her gentle eyes. He saw something special in her, a quality that transcended mere beauty. He provided her with everything she requested, ensuring she had the finest food, the most comfortable quarters, and the most attentive attendants. These were not small favors. In a palace teeming with hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals, such personal attention from a high-ranking official like Hegai was a significant advantage, a quiet endorsement that spoke volumes without a single word being uttered. The days flowed into each other, a gentle current carrying Esther through the elaborate preparations. She learned the customs of the Persian court, the subtle bows, the precise ways to address officials, the unspoken rules of deference and respect. She observed the other women, their hopes, their anxieties, their quiet rivalries, and she learned to navigate this complex social landscape with a calm composure that belied her youth and her hidden heritage. Her thoughts, though, would often drift beyond the perfumed chambers, beyond the palace walls, to the dusty streets of Susa, to her cousin Mordecai, wondering if he was well, if he still sat by the king's gate, a silent sentinel, his heart surely filled with a quiet concern for her. Finally, after the full year had passed, the time came for each young woman to present herself before King Ahasuerus. It was a night of immense anticipation, a moment that could change a life forever, elevating a humble maiden to the highest position in the empire, or sending her back to a life of quiet obscurity within the palace, perhaps to become one of the king's concubines, never to see him again. Each woman was allowed to take with her from the women's quarters whatever she desired to enhance her appearance for this singular encounter. Some chose elaborate jewels, their facets catching the light, sparkling like captured stars. Others selected the finest silks, woven with intricate patterns of gold thread, their colors vibrant and rich. Still others might have chosen exotic perfumes, their fragrances designed to captivate and linger. But when it was Esther's turn, she asked for nothing beyond what Hegai, the king's eunuch, had advised her to take. This was a testament to her trust in his judgment, and perhaps, too, to her own quiet confidence. She did not rely on ostentatious displays or overwhelming adornments. Instead, she chose simplicity, elegance, and the subtle enhancement that Hegai, with his years of experience in the king's court, knew would appeal most to Ahasuerus. Perhaps it was a particular shade of blue silk that complemented her dark hair, or a simple, elegant necklace that drew attention to her graceful neck, or a blend of perfumes that was understated yet unforgettable. Her beauty, it seemed, needed no elaborate embellishment. It shone through naturally, enhanced by the careful preparations and her own serene presence. And so, Esther, whose Hebrew name Hadassah meant of myrtle, a fragrant and beautiful shrub, was brought to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace in the 10th month, which was the month of Tevath, in the 7th year of his reign. The month of Tevath, corresponding to our December-January, would have brought cooler air to Susa, perhaps a crispness that carried the scent of wood smoke from distant hearths, a stark contrast to the warmth and perfume of the women's quarters. The palace, however, would have been a haven of warmth, lit by countless oil lamps and torches, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the polished stone floors and illuminating the vibrant tapestries that adorned the walls. Imagine the long corridors she would have walked, the soft sound of her sandals on the smooth stone, the air growing warmer, more opulent, as she approached the inner chambers. The sounds of the palace would have been muted here, perhaps the distant strumming of a lyre, the murmur of voices from a far-off courtyard, or the gentle splash of a fountain. The heavy, intricately carved doors would have opened to reveal the king's throne room, a space designed to impress and awe, a testament to the immense power and wealth of the Persian Empire. King Ahasuerus, seated upon his magnificent throne, would have been a formidable figure. The throne itself would have been a masterpiece of craftsmanship, perhaps made of gold-plated cedar, inlaid with precious stones, its back rising high, adorned with symbols of Persian might. The king, dressed in rich robes of royal purple or crimson, his beard meticulously groomed, his eyes accustomed to commanding vast armies and ruling over 127 provinces, would have surveyed her with an unblinking gaze. The air in the throne room would have been heavy with the scent of frankincense and other costly incense, burned in ornate censers, creating an atmosphere of reverence and majesty. When the king saw Esther, a quiet stillness fell upon him. The text says that he loved Esther more than all the other women. This was not merely a fleeting attraction, but a profound connection that resonated within him. Her grace, her composure, her gentle beauty, perhaps even a certain vulnerability that she carried with dignity, captivated him completely. He found more favor and kindness in his sight than all the other virgins. This favor and kindness, Hebrew, chen voxt, suggests not just physical appeal, but a deeper emotional and intellectual connection, a sense of belonging and understanding that he hadn't found in the others. He saw in her not just a beautiful woman, but a queen. And so, without hesitation, King Ahasuerus placed the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. The crown itself would have been a heavy, elaborate piece, perhaps a circlet of gold adorned with pearls, rubies, and emeralds, reflecting the light with every subtle movement. The moment the crown settled upon her head, a new destiny was sealed, not just for Esther, but for her people, though the king, and indeed most of the court, remained entirely unaware of this profound secret. The weight of the crown, both literal and metaphorical, would have been immense, a symbol of unimaginable power and responsibility, yet also a constant reminder of the hidden truth she carried. To celebrate this momentous occasion, King Ahasuerus held a great banquet for all his officials and servants, a feast in Esther's honor. Imagine the scene. The vast halls of the palace filled with the murmur of hundreds of voices, the clinking of gold and silver goblets, the rich aromas of roasted meats, sweet pastries, and fine wines. Musicians would have played soft, melodic tunes on harps and flutes, their music weaving through the air, adding to the festive atmosphere. The tables would have groaned under the weight of exotic dishes, prepared by the finest chefs in the empire, served on platters of gold and silver. This was not just a meal, it was a grand declaration, a public affirmation of Esther's new status as queen, a display of royal generosity and power. The king also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces, a gesture of goodwill and celebration, a way to share his joy with his vast empire. And he distributed gifts with royal liberality, showering his court and perhaps even some of the populace with tokens of his immense wealth. Such acts of generosity were common among ancient monarchs, a way to solidify their power, gain favor, and mark significant events. The news of Esther's elevation and the accompanying celebrations would have spread like wildfire throughout the empire, carried by messengers on horseback, echoing in the marketplaces and villages, a testament to the king's pleasure and the new queen's auspicious beginning. Yet, even amidst the joyous celebrations, Esther remained true to Mordecai's instruction. She still did not reveal her family or her people. The secret was a heavy burden, perhaps, but also a shield, a quiet strength she carried within her. Mordecai, ever vigilant, continued to walk daily in front of the court of the women's house, a silent, watchful presence. He longed to know how Esther was faring, to catch a glimpse of her, or at least to hear news of her well-being. His heart would have been a mixture of pride, concern, and a deep, abiding love for the young woman he had raised as his own daughter. He would have observed the comings and goings, listened to the whispers of the palace, piecing together fragments of information, always seeking reassurance that she was safe, that she was thriving, even in this gilded cage. It was during this time, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, a familiar, unassuming figure among the many who frequented the palace entrance, that he overheard a conversation that would prove to be pivotal. Two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, who were among those who guarded the king's threshold, were speaking in hushed tones. These men, known as keepers of the door, were high-ranking officials, trusted with the king's personal safety and privy to many secrets. Their positions gave them intimate access to the king's movements and routines, making them both powerful and potentially dangerous. Mordecai, with his keen ear and his deep understanding of courtly intrigues, listened carefully. He understood their language, perhaps one of the many dialects spoken in the vast empire, or perhaps the common Aramaic used for official communications. He discerned that they were angry, harboring a deep resentment towards King Ahasuerus. The nature of their grievance is not explicitly stated, but it could have been anything from a perceived slight, a denied promotion, a disagreement over policy, or a personal insult. In the volatile world of ancient courts, such resentments could fester, growing into dangerous plots. And indeed, as Mordecai continued to listen, his blood would have run cold. He understood that they were conspiring to lay hands on King Ahasuerus, to assassinate him. This was not a mere rumor or idle gossip, it was a clear and present danger to the very heart of the empire. The air around him, perhaps still carrying the faint scent of horse dung and dust from the road, would have suddenly felt charged with menace. His mind, quick and sharp, would have immediately grasped the gravity of the situation, not just for the king, but for the stability of the entire kingdom and, by extension, for Esther, who was now so deeply intertwined with the king's fate. Without a moment's hesitation, Mordecai revealed this plot to Queen Esther. He knew that she, as queen, now had direct access to the king, a privilege he, as a humble gatekeeper, did not possess. He would have found a way to send a message to her, perhaps through one of her trusted attendants, a discreet note carried under a cloak, or a whispered word passed through a network of loyal servants. The message would have been urgent, concise, and absolutely clear, conveying the mortal danger that loomed over the king. Esther, upon receiving this terrifying news, acted swiftly and decisively. She immediately informed the king in Mordecai's name. This detail is crucial. She did not claim the discovery as her own, but attributed it directly to Mordecai. This act of honesty and loyalty would have further cemented her standing with the king, demonstrating her integrity and her commitment to his well-being. It also subtly elevated Mordecai in the king's eyes, even though his true identity and his relationship to Esther remained hidden. The king, taking the threat seriously, ordered an inquiry. Investigations in ancient Persia were thorough and often brutal. Perhaps there were interrogations, secret informants, or the careful sifting of evidence. And indeed, the matter was investigated, and it was found to be true. Bigthan and Teresh, the two eunuchs, were indeed plotting against the king. The evidence would have been undeniable, perhaps letters or confessions extracted under duress, or the testimony of other loyal servants. As a consequence of their treason, the two eunuchs were hanged on a gallows. The gallows, a stark and brutal symbol of royal justice, would have been erected in a public place, a grim warning to any who dared to contemplate similar acts of disloyalty. The sight would have been a chilling reminder of the king's absolute power and the swift, merciless consequences of defying it. The air, perhaps still smelling faintly of the morning's dew, would have been heavy with the silence that follows such a public execution, a silence broken only by the distant caw of a crow or the rustle of wind through the palm trees. And this momentous event, this act of vigilance and loyalty that saved the king's life, was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. The royal chronicles were meticulously kept records of all significant events, decrees, and achievements of the Persian kings. They were not merely historical documents but official state records, read aloud to the king, consulted by his advisors, and serving as a testament to his reign. The scribes, with their reed pens and ink made from soot and gum Arabic, would have carefully inscribed the details onto parchment or clay tablets, their hands moving with quiet precision, ensuring every fact was accurately preserved for posterity. This act of recording meant that Mordecai's deed, though seemingly small in the grand scheme of an empire, was now indelibly etched into the official history of Persia, a quiet note of gratitude and recognition, waiting for a future moment to be brought to light. The sun would continue its slow arc across the sky, casting long shadows over the palace, and the quiet hum of life in Susa would carry on, oblivious to the subtle shift in fate that had just occurred, a shift that would ripple outwards, touching every corner of the vast kingdom, and eventually, the very destiny of a people. The very destiny of a people. Weeks turned into months, each day unfolding with its own rhythm within the sprawling, sun-drenched palace complex of Susa, a city nestled in the fertile plains of Elam, where the Karkeh River, then known as the Cospes, flowed gently, providing life to the ancient land. The air, often thick with the scent of cypress and cedar from the palace gardens, mingled with the faint, distant aroma of baking bread and the earthy smell of irrigation ditches, carrying the quiet murmur of the city's daily life, a sound that rarely penetrated the thick, adorned walls of the inner court. Inside, the chosen young women, including Hadassah, now known as Esther, continued their meticulous preparations, a one-year-long regimen designed to refine their beauty and grace, making them suitable for the king's discerning eye. This period of purification was not merely about outward appearance, it was a slow, deliberate transformation, a shedding of their former lives, an immersion into the customs and expectations of the Persian court, a world of intricate etiquette and silent power. Each morning, the first rays of dawn would paint the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold, filtering through the high windows of the women's quarters, illuminating dust motes dancing in the cool air and stirring the young women from their slumber. The sounds of their waking were soft, the rustle of fine linen, the gentle clinking of ceramic bowls as water was poured for washing, the low, hushed voices of attendants. They would spend their days under the guidance of Hegai, the king's eunuch, a man whose stern demeanor was softened by a deep understanding of human nature and the delicate balance of palace politics. He oversaw their anointing with oil of myrrh for 6 months, a thick, fragrant balm known for its purifying and preserving qualities, its scent clinging to their skin and hair, a constant reminder of their purpose. Following this, for another 6 months, they were treated with sweet spices and other cosmetics, each application a ritual, each scent a layer in their transformation, preparing them not just for a king, but for a life within the gilded cage of royalty. Esther, with her quiet grace and unassuming nature, navigated this world of opulent confinement with a gentle resilience. She found favor in the eyes of Hegai, who, perhaps sensing her inner strength or her genuine kindness, went beyond his duties to provide her with special attention. He gave her 7 chosen maids from the king's palace, young women who would attend to her every need, their soft footsteps and whispered conversations forming a quiet backdrop to her days. He also moved her and her maids to the best place in the house of the women, a chamber perhaps with a more favorable view of the gardens, or simply one that offered a bit more privacy and comfort, a small kindness that spoke volumes in a place where every privilege was carefully weighed. She, in turn, listened to his advice, absorbing his wisdom about the court, about the king, about the unspoken rules that governed their lives. She revealed nothing about her people or her family, a secret held close to her heart, a silent promise to Mordecai, whose shadow, though unseen, still stretched over her. Mordecai, meanwhile, continued his daily vigil. He would walk each morning to the court of the women's house, a public space outside the inner sanctum, where he could observe from a distance, where the sounds of the palace were a little clearer, where the faint scent of the myrrh and spices might drift on the breeze. He walked not out of idleness, but out of a deep, abiding concern for Esther, for the young woman he had raised as his own daughter, whose fate was now inextricably linked to the whims of a powerful king. He would inquire about her welfare, perhaps speaking to a guard or a lower-ranking attendant, gleaning what little information he could, piecing together fragments of news about her progress, about her spirit. His heart, though heavy with the weight of her secret and the uncertainty of her future, held a quiet hope, a steadfast belief in her strength. He would stand there, a figure among the many who frequented the palace gates, his presence unremarkable to most, yet his purpose singular and profound, his eyes scanning the walls, his ears tuned to the subtle whispers of the court. The vastness of the Persian Empire at this time was truly astonishing, stretching from India to Ethiopia, encompassing 127 provinces, each with its own customs, languages, and traditions, all held together by the formidable administrative machinery of the Achaemenid kings. Susa, one of its four capital cities, along with Persepolis, Ecbatana, and Babylon, was a hub of this immense power, a city of grand architecture, bustling markets, and a constant flow of dignitaries and merchants. The palace itself, built by Darius I and later embellished by Xerxes, was a marvel of engineering and artistry, its foundations laid deep, its walls adorned with glazed bricks depicting winged bulls and archers, its columns soaring towards the sky, crafted from cedar imported from Lebanon and gold from Sardis. The sounds within its walls were a tapestry of languages, the rustle of expensive silks, the distant calls of servants, the rhythmic clang of blacksmiths working in the palace workshops, and the soft, measured footsteps of eunuchs and courtiers. Finally, after the long, patient year of preparation had run its course, the time came for each young woman to be presented to King Ahasuerus. It was a moment of immense anticipation, tinged with anxiety, for their entire future hinged on this single encounter. When Esther's turn arrived, she asked for nothing beyond what Hegai, the king's eunuch who had charge of the women, advised her to take. This was a subtle but significant act of wisdom, a demonstration of her trust in his experience and her lack of personal ambition, a quiet humility that perhaps set her apart from others who might have sought to adorn themselves with every imaginable jewel and finery. She entered the king's private chambers, a space likely imbued with the scent of exotic incense and fine perfumes, perhaps illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps, their flames dancing gently, casting long, shifting shadows across the richly tapestried walls. And when Esther was brought to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace, in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevath, in the 7th year of his reign, a quiet stillness settled in the air. The month of Tevath, corresponding to our December-January, would have brought cooler air to Susa, perhaps a crispness that contrasted with the usual warmth, and the days would have been shorter, the nights longer, lending a certain gravitas to the proceedings. The king, known for his discerning eye and his appreciation for beauty, looked upon her, and in that moment, something shifted. Esther found favor in his sight more than all the other virgins. She won his grace and favor more than all the others. It was not merely her physical beauty, though that was certainly present, but perhaps an inner radiance, a quiet strength, a gentle spirit that shone through, captivating the king in a way the others had not. He placed the royal crown upon her head, a heavy, ornate circlet of gold and jewels, a symbol of immense power and responsibility, and made her queen instead of Vashti. The weight of the crown, both literal and metaphorical, would have been immense, a sudden, dramatic transformation from a quiet, orphaned girl to the queen of the vast Persian Empire. The news of her selection would have rippled through the palace, carried by whispers and murmurs, eventually reaching the ears of Mordecai, who would have felt a complex mixture of relief, pride, and a lingering apprehension for the challenges that lay ahead for his beloved Esther. To celebrate this momentous occasion, King Ahasuerus held a great feast for all his officials and servants, a lavish display of royal generosity, a feast for Esther, a banquet of unparalleled splendor. He also proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces, a day of rest and celebration, and gave gifts with royal liberality, distributing riches and favors as only a powerful monarch could. The sounds of celebration would have filled the palace, music from lyres and flutes, the clinking of golden goblets, the murmur of many voices, the laughter and revelry echoing through the grand halls, while outside, the city of Susa would have joined in the festivities, perhaps with street performers and merchants selling special wares, the air filled with a sense of joyous abandon. Yet, even amidst this triumph, Esther kept her counsel, still revealing nothing about her family or her people, just as Mordecai had commanded her. This was not an act of deception, but one of self-preservation and strategic silence, a recognition that in the intricate web of palace politics, some truths were best kept hidden, at least for a time. Mordecai, ever watchful, continued his presence at the king's gate, a familiar figure among the lesser officials and petitioners, observing, listening, his senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the palace atmosphere, his heart still closely tied to Esther's fate. It was during this time, as Esther was settling into her new, extraordinary life as queen, and Mordecai maintained his quiet vigil at the gate, that an unexpected event unfolded, one that would quietly weave itself into the fabric of their story. Two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, who were among those who guarded the threshold, harbored a deep resentment against King Ahasuerus. Their duties placed them in close proximity to the king, giving them access to his movements, his routines, and perhaps his vulnerabilities. The life of a eunuch in the Persian court, while often powerful and influential, was also one of sacrifice and servitude, and perhaps a festering bitterness had taken root in their hearts, nourished by perceived slights or unfulfilled ambitions. They conspired to lay hands on King Ahasuerus, a plot born of malice and desperation, a dangerous gamble that could have plunged the empire into chaos. Mordecai, with his keen sense of observation and his constant vigilance, overheard their whispered plans. Perhaps he was sitting near the gate, pretending to be engrossed in a scroll, or simply observing the comings and goings, his ears catching fragments of conversation carried on the breeze, the furtive glances, the hushed tones that signaled something amiss. He understood the gravity of what he had heard, the immense danger to the king, and by extension, to the stability of the entire empire, and to Esther's precarious position. Without hesitation, he reported the matter to Queen Esther, sending word through the intricate network of palace communication, perhaps through one of her trusted maids, or a eunuch he knew. Esther, upon receiving this urgent and alarming message, immediately informed the king in Mordecai's name. This act demonstrated her loyalty to the king and her trust in Mordecai, and it also subtly reinforced Mordecai's presence and importance within the palace structure, even though he was not a high-ranking official. An inquiry was made into the matter, a thorough investigation conducted by the king's most trusted officials, men skilled in uncovering treachery and discerning truth from falsehood. The evidence must have been compelling, the plot undeniable, for when the investigation was completed, the two eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, were found guilty. Their treachery was confirmed, and as was the custom for such grave offenses in the Persian Empire, they were both hanged on a gallows, their lives ending abruptly, a stark warning to any who might harbor similar thoughts of rebellion. This significant event, this act of loyalty and swift justice, was not forgotten. It was carefully recorded in the Book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king, a meticulous record-keeping tradition that documented every important event, every decree, every act of service to the crown. These chronicles, often written on clay tablets or papyrus scrolls, were the official memory of the empire, stored in the royal archives, a vast repository of history and law. The entry would have detailed Mordecai's name, his role in uncovering the plot, and the outcome, a quiet testament to his service, waiting patiently for a future moment when its significance would be fully revealed. The ink would have dried on the scroll, the scribe would have carefully rolled it and placed it amongst others, and the quiet hum of life in Susa would have continued, oblivious to the subtle threads of fate that were being woven, threads that would soon intertwine with the rise of another figure, a man named Haman, whose ambition would cast a long, ominous shadow over the land. Over the land, a shadow that would deepen with each passing day, stretching its cold fingers across the vast expanse of the Persian Empire. Haman, the son of Hammedatha, an Agagite, was a man whose lineage carried with it a faint, ancient echo of conflict, a distant memory of battles fought long ago between the Amalekites and the people of Israel, though perhaps few in Susa would have consciously remembered such old animosities. He was a figure who had steadily climbed the intricate ladders of courtly power, his ambition a quiet, persistent fire burning within him, fueled by a sharp mind and an uncanny ability to navigate the complex currents of imperial politics. The king Ahasuerus, in his boundless authority, had elevated Haman above all the other princes who were with him, bestowing upon him a position of unparalleled influence and prestige within the sprawling palace complex and throughout the 127 provinces that stretched from India to Ethiopia. This elevation would have been marked by formal decrees, perhaps read aloud in the bustling marketplaces of Susa, etched onto clay tablets or papyrus scrolls, then copied and dispatched by swift messengers on horseback to the far-flung corners of the empire, announcing Haman's new eminence to all. The king's command was clear and unequivocal. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate, the myriad officials, guards, scribes, and petitioners who frequented the grand entrance to the royal precinct, were to bow down and pay homage to Haman whenever he passed. This was not merely a gesture of respect, but a deeply ingrained custom, a ritual acknowledgement of the king's delegated authority, a public display of submission to the man who now stood second only to the monarch himself. Imagine the scene, the wide, sun-drenched plaza before the great gate, paved with smooth, worn stones, perhaps still cool in the early morning light or shimmering with heat by midday. The air would have been thick with the scent of dust, of spices from the nearby bazaars, the faint aroma of roasting meats, and the more pungent smell of horses and human sweat. The constant murmur of voices, the clatter of sandals on stone, the occasional bray of a donkey, all these sounds would have been part of the daily symphony of the capital. Then, a hush would fall, or at least a noticeable dip in the general din, as Haman's retinue approached. Perhaps a herald would announce his coming, or the glint of his richly embroidered robes and the polished bronze of his guard's armor would signal his presence. As he passed, a wave of prostrations would ripple through the crowd, men and women dropping to their knees, bowing their heads low, some perhaps even touching their foreheads to the dusty ground, a profound act of deference. The silk of their garments, the rough wool of others, would rustle softly as they moved, a collective sigh of submission. This was the expected order of things, the established protocol, a visible manifestation of the hierarchy that governed every aspect of life in the Persian court. Amongst these many servants, day after day, stood Mordecai, the Jew, who sat faithfully at the king's gate. His post was a humble one, yet strategic, allowing him to observe the comings and goings of the powerful, to hear the whispers and rumors that circulated through the court. He was a man of quiet dignity, his face perhaps etched with the lines of experience, his eyes observant, missing little. As Haman would pass, Mordecai would remain seated, or perhaps stand, but he would not bow down, nor would he pay him homage in the manner prescribed. His refusal was not born of insolence or a desire for confrontation, but from a deeper conviction, a quiet adherence to the traditions and beliefs of his people. For Mordecai, bowing down in such a manner to a man, especially one who carried the lineage of an ancient enemy, would have been an act that compromised his faith, a betrayal of the one true God he worshipped. It was a silent, steadfast act of defiance, rooted in a heritage that stretched back through generations, a principle that ran deeper than the dictates of any earthly king or vizier. The other king's servants who were with him at the king's gate, those who observed this daily ritual and Mordecai's consistent deviation from it, began to question him. Their voices would have been low, perhaps tinged with curiosity or concern. "Why do you transgress the king's command?" they would ask, their words a soft murmur in the bustling courtyard. They might have gestured subtly towards Haman as he disappeared into the palace, or glanced nervously around to see if their conversation was overheard. The sun would have continued its slow arc across the sky, casting long shadows that shifted and changed with the hours, but the question would persist, hanging in the air like an unanswered riddle. Day after day, they spoke to him, urging him, perhaps trying to persuade him to conform, to avoid trouble. They might have reasoned with him, pointing out the practical dangers of his refusal, the potential wrath of a powerful man like Haman. "Do you not fear the consequences?" they might have whispered, their eyes conveying a sense of unease. But Mordecai would not listen to them. He simply explained to them that he was a Jew. This simple statement, "I am a Jew," carried with it a profound weight of history, a declaration of identity and allegiance that transcended the immediate demands of the Persian court. It was a quiet assertion of a different law, a different covenant, one that shaped his very being and dictated his actions. He did not elaborate, did not preach, but merely stated his truth, a truth that for him was immutable. When the servants saw that Mordecai continued in his refusal, and that he held firm to his conviction, they decided to tell Haman. Perhaps they did so out of genuine concern for the stability of the court, or perhaps out of a desire to curry favor with the powerful vizier, or even out of a subtle resentment for Mordecai's perceived stubbornness. The news would have reached Haman's ears through hushed tones, perhaps during a quiet moment in his richly appointed chambers, or as he walked through a shaded garden path within the palace grounds. The air would have been fragrant with exotic blossoms, the distant sound of trickling water from a fountain a gentle counterpoint to the disturbing news. They wanted to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, whether his Jewish identity would truly exempt him from the king's explicit command. When Haman learned of Mordecai's steadfast refusal, his reaction was not immediate, but a slow burn of anger that began to simmer beneath his polished exterior. At first, perhaps, it was a flicker of annoyance, a minor irritation that someone, a mere gatekeeper, would dare to defy him. But as he pondered it, as the slight replayed in his mind, the annoyance deepened into a profound indignation, a sense of personal affront. He, Haman, the most honored man in the empire after the king, to be so openly disregarded? The very thought would have been an insult to his immense pride, a challenge to his newly acquired authority. He was filled with wrath, a cold, dangerous fury that began to consume his thoughts. To lay hands on Mordecai alone, to punish only him, seemed too small, too insignificant a retribution for such a public act of disrespect. Haman's ambition was vast, and so too was his capacity for vengeance. He had been told that Mordecai was a Jew, and this piece of information, perhaps initially just a detail, began to expand in his mind, taking on a more sinister significance. It was not merely one man's defiance, but the defiance of an entire people, a collective challenge to his power. The ancient echoes of conflict, the faint memory of the Amalekites and their long-standing enmity with the Israelites, might have stirred within him, giving his personal grievance a historical weight, a sense of inherited justification. He began to devise a plan, not just for Mordecai, but for all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, a plan that would extinguish their presence from the vast empire. In the first month, which is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus' reign, a time when the spring air in Susa would have been mild and pleasant, carrying the scent of new growth and distant blossoms, Haman cast that is, the lot, before him. This was a common practice in the ancient world, a way of seeking divine guidance or determining auspicious timing for important undertakings. Imagine the scene: Haman, perhaps in a quiet, secluded chamber, surrounded by the hushed reverence of his personal advisors or diviners. The air might have been still, perhaps scented with incense, the only sound the soft rustle of parchment or the gentle clatter of the lots as they were cast. The lots, small stones or pieces of wood, each marked with a different day or month, would have been shaken in a vessel, perhaps a clay pot or a woven basket, then spilled onto a prepared surface. The outcome would be carefully observed, interpreted by those who understood the omens. The casting of the lot was to determine the day and the month for the execution of Haman's terrible plan. The lots fell for the 12th month, which is the month Adar, a full 11 months away. This delay, though perhaps frustrating for Haman's immediate thirst for vengeance, would ultimately prove to be a crucial element in the unfolding drama, allowing time for other threads of fate to weave themselves into the tapestry of events. The long wait would stretch out, a period of quiet anticipation for Haman, a time of oblivious peace for the Jews, and a period of mounting tension for the narrative itself, building towards a climax that was still far off on the horizon. With the date determined, Haman approached King Ahasuerus. The king would have been seated on his magnificent throne, perhaps in the grand audience hall, a space of immense scale and opulent decoration, its walls adorned with intricate reliefs depicting royal hunts and triumphs, its floor paved with polished stone or vibrant mosaics. The light, filtered through high windows, would have fallen in shafts, illuminating the rich colors of tapestries and the glint of gold and silver. The air would have been cool and still, a stark contrast to the bustling activity outside the palace walls. Haman's voice, though outwardly respectful, would have carried an undertone of urgency, a carefully measured gravity. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, he began, his words carefully chosen, designed to appeal to the king's sense of order and imperial authority. He would have painted a picture of a disruptive, disloyal element within the empire, a subtle threat to the king's absolute rule. He would have spoken of their laws being different from those of every other people, a truth that was undeniable, for the Jewish people indeed lived by a distinct set of divine laws that governed their lives, their diet, their worship, and their communal practices. This difference, Haman would have argued, made them incompatible with the uniform administration of the empire, a source of potential discord. He continued, his voice perhaps growing a little more insistent, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. This was the crux of his argument, a direct challenge to the king's perceived self-interest. He was implying that the very presence of this people undermined the king's authority and jeopardized the stability of his vast domain. He carefully avoided mentioning Mordecai by name, generalizing the perceived transgression to an entire people, making it an issue of imperial policy rather than a personal vendetta. Then came the insidious proposal, cloaked in an offer of immense wealth. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries. 10,000 talents of silver was an astronomical sum, a staggering amount of wealth that would have represented a significant portion of the royal treasury, enough to fund armies or undertake massive building projects. This offer was designed to sweeten the deal, to make the destruction of an entire people seem not only politically expedient but also financially advantageous. The king, perhaps accustomed to such grand gestures from his powerful vizier, and perhaps not fully grasping the horrific implications of Haman's proposal, listened intently. The weight of the silver, the imagined clink of coins, the thought of such a vast sum flowing into his coffers might have dulled the edge of any potential moral objection. King Ahasuerus, without much deliberation, perhaps trusting Haman implicitly, or perhaps simply weary of the complexities of governing such a vast and diverse empire, took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The signet ring was the ultimate symbol of royal authority, its impression on a wax seal giving a decree the full force of the king's own word, making it immutable and irreversible. The smooth, cool metal of the ring, perhaps adorned with an engraved image or the king's personal insignia, would have felt heavy in Haman's palm, a tangible manifestation of the immense power now placed in his hands. The air in the audience hall would have remained still, the gravity of the moment perhaps lost on all but Haman himself, whose heart would have swelled with triumph. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you, and the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you." These words, spoken with casual authority, sealed the fate of an entire people. The king, in his detached magnanimity, had essentially given Haman carte blanche, granting him not only the financial means but also the human lives to dispose of as he saw fit. It was a chilling delegation of power, a testament to the absolute nature of Persian kingship and the immense trust placed in Haman. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. Imagine them, perhaps a group of learned men with ink-stained fingers and serious expressions, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps, even if it were daylight, as they worked indoors in quiet scriptoriums. They would have been brought to Haman, who would have dictated the decree with meticulous precision. The air would have been thick with the scent of papyrus, of parchment, of lamp oil, and the faint metallic tang of ink. The scratching of reed pens on the surfaces would have been the only sound, a rhythmic counterpoint to Haman's measured voice. The decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, addressed to the king's satraps, and to the governors over every province, and to the officials of every people, to every province according to its own script and to every people in its own language. This meticulous attention to detail ensured that the decree would be understood by all, leaving no room for misinterpretation or evasion. The vastness of the empire meant a multitude of languages and writing systems, and the scribes would have worked tirelessly, translating and transcribing, their hands moving swiftly across the surfaces. The letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, sealed with the king's signet ring, making them official and inviolable. Imagine the couriers, young men perhaps, strong and swift, mounted on the finest horses, their faces grim with the knowledge of the terrible message they carried. They would have galloped out of Susa, their horses' hooves drumming a steady rhythm on the dusty roads, their speed a symbol of the urgency and finality of the decree. They would have ridden day and night, through bustling towns and desolate stretches of desert, across rivers and over mountains, carrying the weight of a death sentence to every corner of the vast empire. The decree commanded that all Jews, young and old, little children and women, should be destroyed, killed, and annihilated on one single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar. And their property was to be plundered, adding a layer of economic incentive to the horrific act. The language was stark, unambiguous, leaving no room for mercy or reprieve. The date, set so far in the future, would have created a chilling sense of dread, a long, drawn-out period of fear and uncertainty for those who would soon learn of their impending doom. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province and made public to all peoples, so that they should be ready for that day. The public announcement would have been a terrifying spectacle, the words of the decree read aloud in the marketplaces, in town squares, perhaps by stentorian-voiced officials, their words echoing through the shocked silence of the crowds. The sun would have beaten down, oblivious to the sudden chill that would have gripped the hearts of the Jewish communities. The air, once filled with the ordinary sounds of daily life, would have been thick with unspoken fear, a palpable sense of impending catastrophe. Haman and the king sat down to drink, celebrating their decision, perhaps with fine wines poured into golden goblets, the clinking of the vessels a sharp contrast to the silent terror that was about to descend upon the Jewish people. The palace, with its cool, shaded courtyards and fragrant gardens, would have remained an oasis of calm and luxury, oblivious to the storm that had just been unleashed. But the city of Susa itself was thrown into confusion. The news would have spread like wildfire, carried by whispers and gasps, by the frantic movements of people trying to understand the incomprehensible. The usual rhythm of life, the haggling in the bazaars, the laughter of children, the drone of daily work, would have been replaced by a pervasive sense of unease, a quiet panic. The dust motes would have danced in the shafts of sunlight, oblivious to the human drama unfolding beneath them, as the long, slow march towards that dreadful day in Adar had begun, and the threads of fate, once subtly woven, were now pulled taut, stretching towards a moment of unimaginable crisis. The threads of fate, once subtly woven, were now pulled taut, stretching towards a moment of unimaginable crisis, and the silent city of Susa, with its grand palaces and bustling bazaars, continued its daily rhythm, unaware of the shadow that had fallen over its Jewish inhabitants. Mordecai, a man whose life had been a quiet tapestry of duty and faith, now found himself plunged into a profound and personal anguish, a grief that settled deep in his bones and clouded his vision, making the vibrant hues of the Persian capital seem dull and muted. He tore his clothes, a ritual of despair as ancient as his people, the rough fabric ripping with a sound that must have echoed hollowly in his own ears, a physical manifestation of the tearing of his heart. He clothed himself in sackcloth, a coarse, scratchy garment woven from goat hair, a deliberate discomfort to match the agony within him, and sprinkled ashes upon his head, the fine grey powder clinging to his hair and beard, a visible sign of his mourning, his lamentation. He did not retreat into the quiet solitude of his home, but instead went out into the very heart of the city, walking through the broad avenues that led to the King's Gate, a place usually bustling with petitioners and officials, merchants and guards, but now, for Mordecai, it was a stage for his public sorrow. His cries, though not necessarily loud or piercing, would have been deep and resonant, a mournful wail that spoke of unspeakable loss, a lamentation that carried the weight of generations of suffering, a sound that would have cut through the usual clamor of the marketplace, drawing curious glances and hushed whispers. The dust of the street, stirred by the passing feet of countless individuals, would have mingled with the ashes on his head, creating a gritty, tangible representation of his despair. He could not, however, pass through the King's Gate itself, for the customs of the Persian court, as strict and unyielding as the stone walls of the palace, forbade anyone clothed in sackcloth from entering such sacred ground. It was a rule designed to maintain the decorum and majesty of the royal presence, to shield the king from the raw, unvarnished sorrow of the common man, but for Mordecai, it was another barrier, another symbol of his helplessness, standing just outside the threshold of power, yet utterly unable to directly influence the decree that threatened to consume his people. So he remained there, a solitary figure of grief, a silent sentinel of sorrow, his presence a stark contrast to the opulent grandeur of the palace beyond the gate, a living testament to the impending doom. As the news of Haman's decree spread like wildfire through the vast empire, carried by royal couriers on swift horses, the Jewish communities in every province were seized by a similar wave of shock and despair. From the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean to the distant reaches of India, wherever Jewish families had settled, building their homes and their lives, the same terrible tidings arrived, shattering their peace. The scrolls, sealed with the king's signet ring, would have been unrolled in city squares and synagogue courtyards, their words read aloud by trembling voices, revealing the chilling edict, a day appointed for their annihilation, a day when they would be destroyed, slaughtered, and perished, their property plundered. In city after city, the response was uniform: great mourning, fasting, weeping, and wailing. The sounds of lamentation would have risen from every Jewish quarter, a collective cry of anguish that pierced the air, mingling with the everyday sounds of the Persian towns. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes, just as Mordecai did, mirroring his public display of grief, a shared ritual of despair that bound them together in their suffering. The smells of their homes, usually filled with the comforting aroma of baking bread or simmering stews, would have been replaced by the acrid scent of wood smoke from hearths left untended, or the faint, metallic tang of tears. The texture of the sackcloth, rough against their skin, would have been a constant, abrasive reminder of their plight, a physical echo of the spiritual torment they endured. The light of day, once a source of comfort, now seemed to cast long, ominous shadows, and the nights, usually a time for rest, were filled with restless tossing and turning, with whispered prayers and tearful pleas. Within the gilded cages of the palace, Queen Esther remained, for a time, unaware of the cataclysmic events unfolding beyond the palace walls. Her days would have been a structured rhythm of royal duties and quiet moments within her private chambers, surrounded by the soft rustle of silk, the gentle scent of exotic perfumes, and the hushed whispers of her attendants. The thick walls of the harem, designed to protect and isolate the royal women, also served to shield them from the harsher realities of the outside world, creating a serene, almost ethereal bubble of existence. It was her eunuchs and female attendants, those who moved between the queen's private quarters and the more public areas of the palace, who first brought her news of Mordecai's distress. They would have seen him, a familiar figure, often found near the king's gate, now transformed by grief, his usual dignified bearing replaced by the raw posture of lamentation. Their reports to Esther would have been hesitant, perhaps, delivered with a mix of concern and apprehension, for to bring news of such profound distress to the queen was unusual, a break in the serene flow of her days. They would have described his torn clothes, the sackcloth, the ashes, the deep, guttural sounds of his wailing, painting a vivid picture of his sorrow. Esther was deeply distressed by this news. Mordecai, her cousin, her guardian, the man who had raised her with such quiet devotion, was in such visible agony, and she could not comprehend the reason. Her first instinct, born of affection and concern, was to alleviate his physical discomfort, to restore him to his usual appearance. She sent clothes to him, fine garments, perhaps of linen or soft wool, suitable for a palace official, hoping that by shedding the sackcloth, he might also shed some of his sorrow. The attendants carrying these clothes would have moved with quiet efficiency through the palace courtyards, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth or the polished stone, carrying the queen's message of concern. But Mordecai refused the clothes. His refusal would have been firm, perhaps even delivered with a quiet intensity that surprised the attendants, for his grief was not merely about outward appearance, it was a deep-seated anguish that no change of garment could assuage. The message would have returned to Esther, confirming the depth of his distress and deepening her own perplexity. Unable to understand the cause of his profound sorrow, Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been specially appointed to attend her. Hathach was a trusted intermediary, a man who moved freely between the queen's secluded world and the more public, masculine spaces of the court, privy to both the intimate concerns of the harem and the broader currents of palace politics. She commanded him to go to Mordecai, to find out what was troubling him, and why he was behaving in such an extraordinary manner. Hathach, accustomed to the delicate diplomacy of the court, would have approached Mordecai with a respectful demeanor, his voice low and deferential, conveying the queen's concern. Hathach found Mordecai in the city square, still near the king's gate, a figure of stark contrast against the backdrop of the bustling city. The sun, perhaps, was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the square, or perhaps it was high noon, beating down relentlessly, adding to the harshness of Mordecai's situation. The air would have been thick with the smells of the city, spices from market stalls, the faint scent of animal dung, the dry dust of the unpaved streets. Mordecai, his face etched with sorrow, would have recounted the entire story to Hathach, his voice perhaps hoarse from weeping, but clear in its articulation of the terrible decree. He explained in detail all that had happened to him, the vast sum of silver Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews, a sum so immense it spoke to the depth of Haman's hatred and the ruthlessness of his plan. He would have described the specific language of the decree, the chilling words that condemned an entire people, and the date, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, that hung over them like a sword. Mordecai also gave Hathach a copy of the written decree, the very document that had been issued in Susa, to show to Esther, so that she might read it for herself and fully comprehend the gravity of the situation. The parchment, perhaps still crisp from the royal scribes, would have felt cold and unyielding in Hathak's hands, its elegant script belying the horror of its content. And then, with a quiet intensity, Mordecai laid upon Esther a solemn charge, a burden of immense weight. He commanded her to go to the king, to plead with him, to beg for the lives of her people. His words would have been carefully chosen, imbued with the urgency of their predicament, yet delivered with the respect due to her royal station. He was not merely asking, he was imploring, urging her to step into a role she had perhaps never envisioned for herself, a role that demanded courage far beyond the confines of her comfortable life. Hathak returned to Esther, his face perhaps a little paler, his demeanor more subdued, having been exposed to the raw truth of the decree. He relayed Mordecai's words, his voice low and serious, and presented the queen with a copy of the terrifying edict. Esther, as she unrolled the parchment, would have felt the smooth, dry texture of the material beneath her fingers, her eyes scanning the familiar Aramaic script, each word a hammer blow to her heart. The reality of the situation, once a distant rumor, now became a chilling certainty, a personal threat to her own existence and to the lives of everyone she held dear. Her initial reaction was one of profound fear, a natural human response to such an overwhelming and dangerous request. She knew the strict, unbending law of the Persian court, a law as immutable as the king's word itself. Any man or woman who approached the king in the inner court without being summoned faced a single, inescapable consequence: death. The only exception, the slender thread of hope, was if the king extended his golden scepter, a gesture of mercy, a sign that the petitioner was granted life. And Esther had not been summoned by the king for 30 days. 30 days. In the fast-paced world of the court, 30 days could feel like an eternity, or a mere blink, but for a queen, it could signify a cooling of affection, a shift in royal favor, a dangerous distance. She sent Hathak back to Mordecai with this message, explaining the peril, the very real threat to her own life should she attempt to approach the king unbidden. Her words would have conveyed her apprehension, her deep concern for her own safety, a concern that was entirely rational given the brutal realities of Persian imperial power. The air in her chambers might have felt heavy, stifled by the weight of this impossible choice. Mordecai's response, carried back by Hathak, was unwavering, a powerful and direct challenge to Esther's fear. His message was not one of comfort, but of stark truth and profound conviction. He urged her not to imagine that in the king's palace, she alone among all the Jews would escape. His words would have cut through any illusion of safety she might have harbored, reminding her that her royal status, her gilded cage, offered no true protection from the decree that targeted all Jews, without exception. The very air she breathed within the palace walls was still Persian air, and the decree, once enacted, would reach even there. Then came the pivotal, resonant words, words that would echo through history, words that called her to a destiny she could not evade, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? These were not merely words, they were a profound challenge, a spiritual awakening. Mordecai was reminding her of the enduring faith of their people, the belief that divine providence would ultimately prevail, even if it meant raising up another deliverer. But he was also placing before her the stark choice, to embrace her destiny or to face the consequences of inaction, not just for herself, but for her entire lineage. The phrase "for such a time as this" would have hung in the air, imbued with a sense of cosmic purpose, a whisper of a greater plan unfolding, a moment ordained by forces beyond human comprehension. It suggested that her elevation to queen, her journey from a humble Jewish maiden to the pinnacle of Persian power, was not a mere accident of fate, but a deliberate preparation for this very crisis. The weight of Mordecai's words settled upon Esther, heavy and undeniable. The soft silks of her robes, the fragrant oils, the hushed elegance of her surroundings, all seemed to recede, replaced by the stark reality of her people's peril and her own unique position. She understood, in that moment, that she could not stand idly by. Her fear was still present, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now tempered by a growing sense of resolve, a quiet determination that began to bloom within her. She sent her final message back to Mordecai, a message that marked her acceptance of the perilous path ahead. Her instructions were clear, precise, and deeply spiritual. She asked him to gather all the Jews who were present in Susa, the entire community, and to hold a fast on her behalf. This was not merely a dietary restriction, it was a profound act of communal prayer and supplication, a turning to their God in a time of desperate need. She asked them to neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day, a period of intense spiritual focus, a plea for divine intervention. "And I," she declared, "along with my young women, my attendants within the palace, will also fast as you do." This was a significant commitment, for the strictures of a royal household, with its constant demands and routines, made such a prolonged fast a remarkable act of devotion. Her attendants, who were likely not Jewish, would have joined her out of loyalty and love, perhaps sensing the immense gravity of the situation, their own lives interwoven with hers. The palace, usually a place of feasting and luxury, would become a place of solemn abstinence, a quiet sanctuary of prayer. Then came her final, courageous declaration, words that echoed with the quiet strength of a woman stepping into her destiny. "And so I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." The phrase "if I perish, I perish" was not a cry of despair, but a statement of resolute acceptance, a recognition of the ultimate risk, and a willingness to face it head-on. It was a surrender to the unknown, a profound act of faith in the face of mortal danger. The air in her chambers, once heavy with fear, would now have felt charged with a quiet, steely resolve. Mordecai, upon receiving Esther's message, did everything that she had commanded him. He would have gone through the Jewish quarter of Susa, his voice perhaps still hoarse, but now imbued with a new sense of purpose, gathering the community, explaining the queen's request. The news of Esther's decision, her willingness to risk her life, would have spread through the community like a spark of hope in the deepening gloom. The Jews of Susa, already steeped in mourning, would have embraced the fast with fervent devotion, their collective prayers rising silently from their homes and gathering places, a spiritual shield for their queen. For 3 days and 3 nights, the Jewish community in Susa, along with Esther and her attendants within the palace, abstained from food and drink. The city outside continued its rhythm, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, the distant cries of vendors, the murmur of conversations, but within the Jewish homes and the Queen's private chambers, there was a profound stillness, a focused intensity of prayer. The pangs of hunger and thirst would have been a constant, physical reminder of their desperate plea, sharpening their spiritual focus, uniting them in a shared act of faith and vulnerability. The nights would have been long, filled with quiet contemplation and whispered prayers, the only light perhaps from a flickering oil lamp, casting dancing shadows on the walls as the hours slowly, inexorably, ticked towards the appointed time. On the third day of the fast, a day that would have dawned with a particular weight and solemnity, Esther prepared herself. She laid aside her sackcloth, if she had worn it in her private moments, and put on her royal robes, garments chosen not for their beauty alone, but for their significance, their power. These were not everyday clothes, they were the attire of a queen, designed to command respect and attention, to convey authority and grace. The fabric, perhaps a rich purple or a deep crimson, would have rustled softly as she moved, its weight a reminder of the burden she carried. The jewels, carefully chosen, would have caught the light, sparkling with a silent brilliance, a stark contrast to the quiet determination in her eyes. She then walked into the inner court of the king's palace, the most sacred and restricted area, facing the king's hall. The air in this part of the palace would have been cooler, perhaps, the silence more profound, broken only by the soft echo of her own footsteps. The inner court was a place of immense power and potential danger, a threshold between life and death. The king was seated on his royal throne, in the royal house, facing the entrance, his gaze perhaps fixed on the doorway, or perhaps lost in thought, unaware of the momentous arrival that was about to occur. The throne itself would have been a magnificent structure, carved from precious woods, inlaid with ivory and gold, draped with rich fabrics, a symbol of absolute authority. The light in the throne room would have been carefully managed, perhaps streaming in through high windows, illuminating the king in a majestic glow. Esther stood in the inner court, her heart undoubtedly pounding, a silent drumbeat against the stillness of the room. She would have been visible to the king, a solitary figure framed in the doorway, her presence a bold defiance of court protocol, a silent plea. The moments that followed would have stretched into an eternity, each breath a conscious act, each second heavy with fate. The king, Ahasuerus, would have looked up, his eyes falling upon the unexpected sight of his queen, standing unsummoned in the forbidden space. His expression, in that crucial moment, held the power of life and death. And as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, a flicker of something, perhaps favor, perhaps surprise, perhaps a memory of her beauty and grace, stirred within him. His heart, or perhaps his mind, was moved, and he extended to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. The scepter, a symbol of his authority, a long, slender rod of gleaming gold, would have glinted in the light as he raised it, a gesture of mercy that cut through the rigid laws of the court. It was a sign, a clear, unmistakable signal that her life was spared, that she was granted permission to approach. Esther, her breath perhaps catching in her throat, drew near and touched the tip of the scepter. This was a gesture of acceptance, a formal acknowledgement of the king's grace, a silent act of submission and gratitude. The cool, smooth metal beneath her fingertips would have been a tangible confirmation of her reprieve, a moment of profound relief washing over her. The tension that had gripped her, a tight band around her chest, would have begun to loosen, allowing her to breathe more freely. Then the king spoke, his voice, perhaps, carrying a note of curiosity or even a touch of tenderness. "What is it?" Queen Esther, what is your request? It shall be given to you, even to the half of my kingdom. His words were expansive, a grand declaration of royal generosity, a testament to the power he wielded and his affection for her. The phrase, even to the half of my kingdom, was a common royal idiom, signifying an extraordinary promise, an offer of almost limitless bounty, a testament to the depth of his favor in that moment. The air in the throne room, once thick with unspoken fear, now seemed to soften, filled with the possibility of hope, a fragile, nascent hope that had been born from Esther's courage and the king's unexpected mercy. The light from the high windows would have continued to stream in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, oblivious to the human drama, as Esther stood before the king, her heart still beating a steady rhythm, preparing to voice her plea, a plea that carried the weight of a people's survival, a moment poised on the precipice of destiny, the quiet hum of the palace a distant backdrop to the unfolding story, the scent of exotic flowers from the palace gardens drifting faintly through the open archways, a gentle reminder of the world outside, waiting for the Queen's next words, as the long shadows of the afternoon began to lengthen across the polished floors, and the soft rustle of her royal robes was the only sound in the hushed chamber, a moment suspended in time, a breath held collective. A breath held collective, as Esther, with a quiet resolve settling deep within her, finally spoke, her voice a soft murmur, yet clear enough to carry through the still air of the royal apartments, instructing her attendants to send a message to Mordecai, her cousin, who she knew would be waiting anxiously by the king's gate, perhaps under the shade of one of the ancient cedars, or near the bustling market stalls where the scent of cumin and dried figs lingered in the warm Persian air. She requested that he gather all the Jews who were present in Susa, the sprawling capital city, with its magnificent palaces and bustling bazaars, its terraced gardens and the distant glint of the Caspian River, a vital artery that brought life and trade to the heart of the empire. Susa, an ancient city, had witnessed centuries of history, from Elamite kings to the mighty Achaemenids, its very stones imbued with the echoes of countless lives and the grandeur of successive empires, now under the vast dominion of King Ahasuerus. Esther's request was simple yet profound. She asked them to fast for her, to abstain from food and drink for 3 days and 3 nights, a solemn period of introspection and supplication, a collective turning towards the heavens in a time of profound uncertainty. She herself, along with her young women, her handmaidens who had accompanied her from her humble beginnings and now served her within the gilded cages of the palace, would also fast, sharing in this communal act of devotion, their own stomachs empty but their spirits focused. This act of fasting, a deeply ingrained practice in their tradition, was not merely a physical deprivation but a spiritual discipline, a way of emptying oneself to be filled with a different kind of strength, a quiet plea for divine intervention in a situation that seemed utterly hopeless from a human perspective. She understood the gravity of what she was about to do, the immense risk she was preparing to undertake, for to approach the king unsummoned was to invite death, a decree as unyielding as the stone walls of the palace itself, a rule designed to protect the monarch's sanctity and power, to prevent impulsive or unwelcome intrusions upon his royal person. Yet, she concluded her message to Mordecai with words that carried the weight of destiny, a quiet declaration of resolve that resonated with the courage of her ancestors, "And if I perish, I perish." These words, spoken softly in the quiet of her chamber, were not a cry of despair but a statement of acceptance, a willingness to face the ultimate consequence for the sake of her people, a profound act of self-sacrifice born from a deep sense of duty and a quiet, unshakable faith. The messenger, perhaps a trusted eunuch with soft-soled sandals, moved swiftly and silently through the palace corridors, past the intricate carvings on the walls depicting winged bulls and royal processions, past the vast courtyards where fountains murmured softly, their water catching the fading light, and out through the massive gates that led to the city. He found Mordecai at the king's gate, still clad in sackcloth and ashes, his face etched with worry, his posture slumped with the burden of the terrible news he carried. The king's gate was a hub of activity, even as evening approached, with merchants packing away their wares, scribes closing their scrolls, and guards changing shifts, their bronze armor glinting dully in the twilight. The air was thick with the scent of dust, sweat, and the lingering aroma of spices from the market. When the messenger delivered Esther's words, Mordecai listened intently, his heart a complex mix of relief and renewed apprehension. Relief that Esther had not forgotten her people, that she was willing to act, but apprehension at the immense danger she was about to face. He understood the depth of her courage, the terrifying gamble she was proposing. He sent back a reply to Esther, a message that was both an affirmation and a gentle, yet firm, reminder of their shared heritage and the profound responsibility that now rested upon her shoulders. He told her not to imagine that in the king's palace she would escape any more than all the other Jews. He spoke of the inescapable nature of their shared fate, that her royal position, while offering temporary comfort and luxury, would not shield her from Haman's genocidal decree. He reminded her, with a quiet urgency, that perhaps she had come to her royal position for such a time as this, a phrase that would echo through generations, a profound question that carried within it the weight of divine purpose. This was not merely a chance occurrence, he implied, but a moment woven into the fabric of time, a destiny unfolding. He urged her to consider the possibility that her elevation to queen, from a humble orphan to the most powerful woman in the empire, was not merely a stroke of luck but a deliberate act of providence, a preparation for this very crisis. His words were not meant to pressure her with guilt, but to empower her with purpose, to awaken within her the deep well of strength and courage he knew she possessed. Mordecai's message, carried back by the same silent messenger, reached Esther in the quiet solitude of her chamber, perhaps as the last rays of the sun painted the western sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, dancing shadows across the patterned rugs. She absorbed his words, letting them settle deep within her, confirming what she already instinctively knew. The decision was hers, and hers alone, but the path was now clear. She sent back her final instructions: "Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Susa, and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Her resolve was now firm, unshakable, a quiet determination that shone through the soft lamplight illuminating her face. And so, Mordecai went his way, his heart heavy but resolute, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. He moved through the streets of Susa, his sackcloth a stark contrast to the colorful garments of the city dwellers, his voice low but urgent as he spoke to his fellow Jews, spreading the word of the queen's request. The Jewish community in Susa was a vibrant, established presence, having lived in Persia for generations since the Babylonian exile. They were merchants, artisans, scribes, farmers, their lives interwoven with the fabric of Persian society, yet they maintained their distinct cultural and religious identity. They gathered in their homes, in quiet courtyards, in hushed synagogues, their faces reflecting a mixture of fear, hope, and a deep sense of communal solidarity. The fasting began, a citywide hush settling over the Jewish quarter, not just from the absence of food and drink, but from the profound silence of collective prayer and contemplation. Children, too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, sensed the solemnity in their parents' eyes. The sounds of daily life, the clatter of cooking pots, the laughter of children, the murmur of conversation, were replaced by a quiet stillness, broken only by the occasional sigh or the soft rustle of prayer shawls. For 3 days and 3 nights, the community turned inward, their hopes and fears directed towards the heavens, their collective spirit a beacon of unwavering faith in the face of an existential threat. Within the palace walls, Esther and her handmaidens also began their fast. The opulent surroundings of the queen's apartments, usually filled with the gentle sounds of silks rustling, perfumes being prepared, and soft conversation, now held a different kind of quiet. The rich aromas of the royal kitchens, usually wafting through the air, were unnoticed. Esther, perhaps sitting by a window overlooking the meticulously manicured gardens, where exotic birds sang their evening songs, felt the gnawing emptiness in her stomach, a physical manifestation of the spiritual burden she carried. Her handmaidens, young women who had grown to admire and love their queen, shared in her solemnity, their own hunger, a small sacrifice in solidarity with their mistress and her people. They spent their time in quiet reflection, perhaps reciting ancient prayers, their voices soft and low, blending with the gentle hum of the palace at night. The 3 days and 3 nights passed slowly, each hour stretching into an eternity, filled with anticipation and a deep, quiet dread. On the 3rd day, as the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky in soft hues of rose and gold, filtering through the high windows of the palace, Esther prepared herself. She shed the simple garment she had worn during her fast and adorned herself in her royal robes, not for vanity, but as a deliberate act of assuming her regal identity, a symbol of her office and her authority. She chose her finest attire, perhaps a gown of deep sapphire blue, embroidered with threads of gold and silver, shimmering softly in the morning light, her jewels catching the nascent sun, not to impress, but to fulfill the expectation of a queen approaching her king. Her handmaidens, with practiced hands, helped her, their movements quiet and respectful, their faces reflecting a mixture of concern and admiration. They braided her long, dark hair, perhaps weaving in strands of pearls, and applied the subtle cosmetics that were customary for a queen, enhancing her natural beauty without overwhelming it. The air in her chamber was still, perhaps scented with the delicate fragrance of jasmine or rosewater, a stark contrast to the heavy, musky perfumes often favored by the Persian court. Every detail of her preparation was deliberate, a ritual of transformation from the fasting, humble woman to the majestic queen, ready to face her destiny. When she was fully arrayed, she walked with a quiet dignity, her steps measured and deliberate, through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. The polished stone floors gleamed underfoot, reflecting the soft light from the high windows. The vastness of the palace, with its countless rooms and courtyards, its intricate frescoes and towering columns, could feel overwhelming, a testament to the immense power of the empire. She passed by silent guards, their spears gleaming, their faces impassive, and through grand halls where the echoes of her own footsteps seemed to magnify the silence. Her destination was the inner court of the king's palace, a sacred space, accessible only by royal summons. This was the most dangerous part of her journey, for to enter this court uninvited was a capital offense. The rule was absolute: anyone, no matter their rank or relation, who approached the king in the inner court without being called, faced death, unless the king extended his golden scepter towards them, a gesture of mercy and acceptance, a lifeline offered from the throne. This law was not arbitrary. It was a cornerstone of Persian imperial power, designed to protect the king's person, to control access, and to emphasize his divine right and absolute authority. It ensured that the king was approached only on his terms, maintaining an aura of majesty and invincibility. As Esther reached the entrance to the inner court, her heart must have pounded softly in her chest, a quiet drumbeat against the silence. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with the weight of power and expectation. She paused, perhaps taking a deep, steadying breath, her gaze fixed on the distant figure of the king, seated on his royal throne. King Ahasuerus was seated on his royal throne in the royal house, facing the entrance, his gaze perhaps sweeping across the vast space, or perhaps focused on some scroll or courtier. The throne room itself would have been a breathtaking spectacle of opulence, walls adorned with precious stones, intricate tapestries depicting hunting scenes and mythical creatures, and a ceiling perhaps inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli, reflecting the light from the high windows. The throne itself, likely made of gold and ivory, would have been elevated, placing the king physically above all who approached him, emphasizing his supreme authority. Esther stood in the inner court, directly opposite the king's apartment, her posture erect, her face composed, her royal robes flowing around her like a silent prayer. The distance between her and the throne must have felt immense, a chasm filled with unspoken risks. She knew that her life hung by the thinnest of threads, dependent entirely on the king's disposition, on his whim, on a single gesture. She did not speak, did not move, simply stood there, a silent, regal figure, waiting. The air was thick with tension, though outwardly, the court may have appeared calm, the usual murmur of courtiers and servants hushed in the presence of the king. And it happened, as she stood there, a moment stretched between life and death, that when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. Perhaps it was the unexpected sight of her, radiant in her royal attire after days of absence, or the quiet dignity of her bearing, or a sudden surge of affection for his queen. Whatever the reason, a flicker of recognition, a spark of warmth, crossed his features. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. This was the moment, the crucial gesture, the sign of acceptance, of mercy, of life. The scepter, a symbol of his authority, now became a symbol of his grace. With a quiet sense of relief, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, Esther approached the throne. Her steps were still measured, but now imbued with a newfound lightness. She drew near and touched the top of the scepter, a gesture of submission and acceptance of his authority, a silent acknowledgement of his power and her gratitude for his mercy. The golden scepter, cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, was a tangible connection to her continued existence. Then the king spoke, his voice deep and resonant, filling the vast throne room. "What do you wish, Queen Esther?" What is your request? It shall be given to you, up to half the kingdom. His words were generous, expansive, a testament to his affection and his imperial power. He was offering her anything, a vast portion of his immense empire, a gesture of unparalleled generosity, perhaps also a way to reassure her and the court that she was indeed welcome, that her transgression of the law was forgiven. The very phrasing, up to half the kingdom, was a common hyperbolic expression in ancient Near Eastern courts, signifying boundless generosity, a king's willingness to grant almost anything to a favored individual. Esther, however, did not immediately present her true, terrifying request. Her wisdom, honed by years of careful observation and guided by Mordecai's counsel, told her that haste would be her undoing. The king's mood, though currently favorable, could shift. The gravity of Haman's plot, the sheer audacity of it, required careful preparation, a subtle approach. She needed to create an atmosphere of intimacy and trust, to disarm any potential suspicion, to allow the king to relax and be receptive to her plea. So, with a gentle smile and a soft voice, she replied, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Her request was simple, seemingly innocuous, a gracious invitation to a private meal. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy, a way to isolate Haman, to bring him into her sphere of influence, and to create a controlled environment where she could eventually unveil her petition. The mention of Haman, the king's most trusted and powerful vizier, might have surprised the king slightly, but it also suggested a desire for a pleasant, social gathering, perhaps to celebrate some unspoken occasion. The king, pleased by her modest request and perhaps intrigued by her invitation, readily agreed. "Bring Haman quickly," he commanded, his voice carrying across the throne room, "that he may do as Esther has said." Messengers were dispatched immediately to summon Haman, who was likely in his own opulent palace or attending to affairs of state, basking in the glow of his power and the king's favor, completely unaware of the subtle trap being laid for him. And so, the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The banquet hall, perhaps one of the smaller, more intimate dining rooms within the queen's apartments, would have been exquisitely decorated. The air would have been fragrant with exotic spices and the delicate scent of fresh flowers. Soft lamplight or the glow of numerous candles would have cast a warm, inviting ambience across the room. The table would have groaned under the weight of an array of Persian delicacies, roasted meats, fragrant rice dishes, sweet pastries, fresh fruits, and fine wines, all served on gleaming gold and silver platters by silent, attentive servants. The sounds would have been hushed, the clinking of goblets, the soft rustle of silk, the low murmur of conversation. As they reclined on luxurious cushions, enjoying the lavish meal, the king, perhaps mellowed by the wine and the pleasant company, spoke to Esther again. "What is your petition?" "It shall be granted you." "And what is your request?" "Even to half the kingdom, it shall be performed." He was reiterating his earlier promise, urging her to reveal the true purpose of her invitation, sensing that there was more to this banquet than mere hospitality. He was giving her another opportunity, a clear opening to present her case. But Esther, ever cautious, ever strategic, still held back. She knew the moment was not yet right. The king needed to be even more relaxed, more receptive, Haman even more complacent. She needed to build the tension, to draw them deeper into her carefully constructed web. She replied, her voice soft and persuasive, "My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them tomorrow, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." Another banquet. This unexpected delay, this deferral, would have further piqued the king's curiosity, perhaps even heightened his anticipation. For Haman, it would have been another affirmation of his elevated status, a sign of the queen's special regard for him, a further boost to his already immense pride. He would have left the banquet that evening, walking through the palace gardens under the soft glow of the moon, feeling utterly triumphant, his heart swelling with self-importance. Indeed, Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. He imagined himself at the pinnacle of power, favored by both the king and the queen, his enemies soon to be annihilated. His chest would have puffed out a little more, his stride a little more confident as he made his way through the palace gates and into the bustling streets of Susa. The world, it seemed, was bending to his will. However, as he passed through the king's gate, his gaze fell upon Mordecai, still sitting there, perhaps under the same ancient cedar, still clad in his rough sackcloth, still refusing to bow or pay him homage. The sight of Mordecai, his steadfast defiance, was like a sudden, jarring chord in Haman's symphony of triumph. It was a stark reminder of the one person who refused to acknowledge his greatness, the one small thorn in his otherwise perfect rose garden. All his joy, all his gladness, vanished in an instant, replaced by a surge of bitter rage. The immense power he wielded, the favor of the king and queen, all seemed diminished, worthless, in the face of this one man's quiet refusal. Haman, seething with suppressed fury, managed to restrain himself in public, maintaining his composure until he reached his own magnificent home. His palace, likely a sprawling estate with extensive gardens and numerous servants, would have been a testament to his vast wealth and influence. Upon arriving, he immediately sent for his friends and his wife, Zeresh. He needed to vent, to share his frustrations, to seek counsel and validation from those who admired him. When they had gathered around him, perhaps in a lavish courtyard where fountains played and soft music drifted through the air, Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, the multitude of his children, a sign of divine blessing and prosperity in their culture, and all the ways in which the king had promoted him and elevated him above the other officials and the king's servants. He painted a picture of unparalleled success, a man at the very zenith of his career. He boasted of his unique privilege, saying, "Even Queen Esther invited no one but me to come in with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow I am again invited by her, along with the king." His voice would have swelled with pride, his gestures expansive, as he reveled in their admiration. Yet, despite all this, despite the boundless wealth, the numerous children, the supreme power, the unparalleled favor, he confessed, "Yet all this avails me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." The words were laced with venom, his face contorted with bitterness. His friends and his wife, loyal to him and eager to please, listened intently, their own faces reflecting his anger. Then, his wife Zeresh and all his friends, ever ready to fuel his pride and cater to his vengeful desires, offered a suggestion. "Let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high, they proposed, their voices perhaps low and conspiratorial, the idea taking shape in the twilight of Haman's courtyard. 50 cubits, an astonishing height, approximately 75 feet, a towering structure that would be visible from afar, a public spectacle designed to maximize humiliation and terror. And in the morning, they continued, suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it, then go merrily with the king to the banquet. Their counsel was shrewd, appealing to Haman's desire for immediate gratification and public display of power. They understood his vanity, his need for absolute control, and the elimination of any perceived insult. The idea resonated deeply with Haman's vengeful heart. He was delighted by the proposal, seeing it as the perfect solution to his Mordecai problem, a swift and decisive way to remove the irritating obstacle to his perfect happiness. The thought of Mordecai, dangling from such a towering gallows, a public spectacle of his demise, filled him with a dark satisfaction. He immediately gave orders for the gallows to be constructed, perhaps sending his servants out into the night to gather the necessary timber and laborious, the sounds of hammering and sawing beginning to echo faintly in the distance as the city settled into its slumber. That very night, however, a different kind of activity was unfolding within the royal palace. The king, Ahasuerus, found that he could not sleep. Perhaps it was the rich food from Esther's banquet, or the lingering scent of exotic perfumes, or simply the restless stirrings of a monarch's mind burdened by the weight of an empire. Whatever the cause, sleep eluded him. In the quiet solitude of his bedchamber, as the palace slept around him, he commanded that the book of the records of the Chronicles be brought and read before him. This was not unusual. Kings often had scribes read to them to pass the time, to be reminded of past events, or to seek inspiration. These chronicles were meticulously kept, detailing the events of the kingdom, the decrees issued, the achievements of the king, and the acts of loyalty and service performed by his subjects. The scribe, summoned from his sleep, would have moved quietly, his soft-soled sandals barely disturbing the polished floors. He would have unrolled the heavy parchment scrolls, the ancient script carefully penned, and begun to read in a low, measured voice, the words filling the silent chamber like a gentle lullaby, though for the king, they were meant to inform rather than induce slumber. The flickering lamplight would have cast dancing shadows on the walls as the scribe's voice droned on, recounting various historical events, decrees, and acts of service. And it was found written there, amidst the myriad entries of royal decrees and administrative details, that Mordecai had informed on Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who were doorkeepers, men who guarded the threshold of the king's private apartments. These two had conspired to lay hands on King Ahasuerus, to assassinate him. Mordecai, with his keen ear and his loyalty, had uncovered their plot and reported it, saving the king's life. The chronicles meticulously recorded this act of loyalty, a testament to the efficient bureaucracy of the Persian Empire, where every significant event was documented. The king listened, perhaps with a growing sense of recognition, as the scribe read this particular entry. He remembered the incident, the swift justice meted out to the conspirators, but he had perhaps forgotten the name of the man who had brought the plot to light. Now, hearing it again, a quiet thought stirred within him. What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? He inquired, his voice cutting through the scribe's monotone, a sudden sharpness in his tone. He was a king who valued loyalty and understood the importance of rewarding those who served him well. The king's servants who attended him, perhaps a chamberlain or a trusted eunuch, quickly responded, their voices hushed in the quiet of the night. "Nothing has been done for him," they reported, their words confirming the oversight, the neglect of a crucial act of service. A flicker of displeasure, perhaps even a touch of indignation, crossed the king's face. It was an affront to his sense of justice, a lapse in the meticulous record-keeping of rewards and punishments. Just at that moment, as the king was pondering this oversight, Haman had entered the outer court of the king's palace. He had come to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The timing was almost impossibly precise, a confluence of events that seemed orchestrated by an unseen hand. The sounds of his approach, perhaps the soft crunch of his sandals on the gravel of the courtyard, or the low murmur of his attendants, reached the ears of the king's servants. "Who is in the court?" the king asked, his voice still carrying a hint of his earlier irritation. His servants replied, "Haman is standing in the court." "Let him come in," the king commanded, a sudden idea forming in his mind, a plan to rectify the oversight regarding Mordecai, and Haman, brimming with his own dark purpose, stepped into the royal presence, unaware of the profound irony of the moment, unaware that the very man he sought to destroy was about to become the subject of his unwitting elevation, a twist of fate as cruel as it was unexpected, the stage slowly, meticulously being set for a dramatic reversal of fortune, a quiet turning of the tides that would soon sweep away the foundations of his power and his very existence, as the first pale light of dawn began to seep through the high windows, illuminating the intricate patterns on the palace walls, casting long, soft shadows across the polished floors, and the air, still cool from the night, held the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens, a gentle reminder of the world outside, waiting for the king's next words. As the long shadows of the morning began to lengthen across the polished floors, and the soft rustle of his royal robes was the only sound in the hushed chamber, a moment suspended in time, a breath held collective. Ardens, a gentle reminder of the world outside, waiting for the king's next words, as the long shadows of the morning began to lengthen across the polished floors, and the soft rustle of his royal robes was the only sound in the hushed chamber, a moment suspended in time, a breath held collective. Lie, before the king, Ahasuerus, finally spoke, his voice a low, even rumble that seemed to carry the weight of his vast empire, a sound that, even in its quietude, commanded attention, a sound that had shaped the destinies of countless peoples from India to Ethiopia, and now, in this intimate space, it would shape the destiny of one more, the destiny of his queen, Esther, who stood poised, her heart a quiet flutter beneath the layers of fine silk, her gaze steady, yet holding a vulnerability that only a truly observant eye might discern. He asked her, simply, what was her petition, what was her request, even offering her up to half of his kingdom, a grand gesture that was perhaps more rhetorical than literal, yet it underscored the immense power he held, and the favor he was extending to her, a favor that had been denied to Queen Vashti before her, a favor that was now, in this moment, a lifeline. Esther, with a grace that seemed to flow from an inner wellspring of calm, then spoke, her voice soft, yet clear enough to fill the space without echoing, a gentle melody amidst the morning's quietude, and she did not immediately reveal the true depth of her distress, nor the perilous nature of her people's plight, but instead, she invited the king and Haman, the Grand Vizier, to a banquet that she had prepared for that very evening. A seemingly simple request, a deferral of the weighty matters until a more opportune time, a strategic delay that spoke of wisdom and careful planning, a quiet strength that belied her delicate appearance. The king, perhaps accustomed to the elaborate courtly dances of diplomacy, readily agreed, and Haman, puffed up with pride at this singular invitation, a mark of favor rarely bestowed upon anyone outside the royal family, also accepted with a smug satisfaction that was almost palpable, a silent testament to his inflated sense of self-importance. As the day progressed, the preparations for Esther's banquet would have begun in earnest within the women's quarters, a flurry of quiet activity, the soft clinking of silver, the gentle murmur of voices, the fragrant aromas of exotic spices and roasting meats beginning to waft through the air, mingling with the ever-present scent of cedar and myrrh that permeated the palace. The royal cooks, skilled artisans in their own right, would have been meticulously selecting the finest ingredients, perhaps plump dates from the fertile Mesopotamian plains, pomegranates bursting with rhubarb seeds from the sun-drenched orchards, tender lamb seasoned with herbs from the palace gardens, and rich wines from the vineyards of Persia, all prepared with an exquisite attention to detail befitting a royal repast. Esther herself, though perhaps outwardly calm, would have been inwardly wrestling with the enormity of her task, the weight of her people's fate resting heavily upon her slender shoulders, each decision, each word, each gesture, meticulously considered, a silent prayer perhaps forming on her lips as she oversaw the final touches, ensuring every detail was perfect, a testament to her unwavering resolve. Meanwhile, Haman, in his opulent robes and gleaming jewels, would have left the palace that afternoon, his heart swelling with a self-congratulatory pride, the envy of all who saw him, believing himself to be at the pinnacle of his power and influence, basking in the king's favor and the queen's special invitation. He might have imagined the whispers of admiration, the respectful bows, the deferential glances that followed him as he made his way through the bustling streets of Susa, a city teeming with life, with merchants hawking their wares, artisans crafting their intricate pieces, and the general hum of daily existence, all beneath the watchful gaze of the imposing citadel. Yet, as he neared the king's gate, his eyes would have inevitably fallen upon Mordecai, still seated there, a solitary figure amidst the throng, steadfast in his refusal to bow or pay him homage, a tiny, yet persistent, thorn in Haman's side, a constant reminder of a perceived slight that festered in his proud heart. The sight of Mordecai, unyielding and defiant, would have instantly soured Haman's triumphant mood, transforming his elation into a bitter resentment, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. All the honor, all the privilege, all the king's favor, seemed to turn to ashes in his mouth as long as this one man, this Jew, dared to defy him, dared to withhold the obeisance he felt was his due. He would have hurried home, his grand house a sanctuary of luxury and comfort, yet even there, the image of Mordecai would have haunted him, a shadow darkening the corners of his lavish rooms. He called together his friends and his wife, Zeresh, seeking solace and validation, recounting his immense wealth, the multitude of his sons, the high office he held, and the unparalleled favor shown to him by both the king and the queen, culminating in the exclusive banquet invitation. Yet, even as he enumerated these blessings, a deep-seated dissatisfaction, a restless discontent, gnawed at him, and he confessed to them that all these things, all this glory, meant nothing to him, absolutely nothing, as long as he saw Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate, a stark admission of the corrosive power of envy and pride. Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends, perhaps seeking to appease his volatile temper, or perhaps genuinely sharing in his disdain for Mordecai, then offered him a solution, a cruel and decisive one. They suggested he have a gallows constructed, a towering structure, 50 cubits high, a truly imposing sight, a public spectacle of ultimate humiliation and death, and that he should speak to the king in the morning, requesting permission to hang Mordecai upon it. The thought of such a swift and brutal end for his antagonist brought a grim satisfaction to Haman, a flicker of dark pleasure in his eyes, and the idea seemed good to him, a fitting retribution for the perceived insult, a final eradication of the irritant that plagued his thoughts. He immediately gave orders for the gallows to be built, perhaps sending his servants out into the twilight, the sounds of hammers and saws beginning to echo faintly in the distance, a sinister counterpoint to the quiet preparations for Esther's banquet, two very different destinies being shaped under the same Persian sky. As the stars began to pepper the inky canvas of the night sky over Susa, and the city settled into its nocturnal rhythm, a profound restlessness descended upon King Ahasuerus. Sleep, that elusive balm, refused to embrace him, his mind perhaps churning with the day's affairs, the endless complexities of governing an empire that stretched across 127 provinces. The soft glow of oil lamps would have cast dancing shadows on the intricately carved walls of his bedchamber, the scent of expensive incense lingering in the air, yet none of these luxuries could coax slumber. In his wakefulness, a thought, perhaps a subtle prompting, or merely a king's whim, led him to command that the book of records, the chronicles of his reign, be brought and read before him. These chronicles were not mere dry lists of events, but meticulously kept scrolls, often beautifully illuminated, detailing the daily happenings of the court, the decrees issued, the tributes received, and, crucially, the acts of loyalty and service performed by his subjects, a vast repository of the empire's memory. A court official, perhaps a trusted eunuch, would have been roused from his own sleep, his footsteps soft upon the polished stones as he retrieved the heavy scrolls from the royal archives, the parchment crackling faintly as it was unrolled. The gentle rustle of the scrolls, the low, even drone of the reader's voice, would have filled the quiet chambers, a rhythmic cadence meant to soothe, to lull the king into slumber. The words would have flowed, recounting various events, perhaps a border dispute resolved, a new tax levied, a governor appointed, the mundane alongside the momentous. And then, amidst these countless entries, the reader's voice would have paused, then continued, recounting a specific incident, a plot to assassinate King Ahasuerus himself, hatched by two of his own chamberlains, Bigthana and Teresh, a conspiracy that had been uncovered and thwarted. The chronicles then detailed how Mordecai, the Jew, had been the one to discover this nefarious plot and had reported it to Queen Esther, who in turn had informed the king, thereby saving his life. The king, listening intently in the quiet of the night, would have heard this account, the details perhaps stirring a distant memory, a vague recollection of the event. He then inquired, his voice a low question cutting through the stillness, what honor or dignity had been bestowed upon Mordecai for this invaluable service, for saving the life of his sovereign. The answer, delivered by the attending official, was stark and simple: nothing. Absolutely nothing had been done to reward Mordecai. This revelation, in the quiet hours before dawn, would have struck the king with a sense of unease, a lapse in royal protocol, a debt unpaid, a significant oversight in the meticulous administration of his vast empire. Just at that moment, as if fate itself were orchestrating the events, the king asked who was in the court. And it was announced that Haman had just arrived in the outer court, having risen early, his heart still buzzing with the cruel satisfaction of the gallows he had ordered built, eager to secure the king's permission to hang Mordecai. The irony of the timing would have been almost palpable, a silent current flowing through the palace halls. The king, perhaps sensing an opportunity to rectify his oversight, or simply acting on a sudden impulse, commanded that Haman be brought in immediately. Haman, expecting to be ushered into the king's presence to present his petition against Mordecai, would have entered the royal chamber, perhaps with a slight bow, his mind already formulating the words he would use to convince the king of Mordecai's supposed insolence and the necessity of his execution. The air would have been cool, the oil lamps still casting their soft, flickering light, painting long shadows across the opulent furnishings. The king, cutting straight to the heart of the matter, without preamble, posed a question to Haman, a question that would have sent a jolt through the Grand Vizier's self-assured composure. What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Haman, his mind still clouded by his own ambition and his burning desire for Mordecai's downfall, immediately assumed that the king could be speaking of no one else but himself. Who else, in all of Persia, would the king delight to honor more than his most trusted and powerful vizier, the man who sat at his right hand? His heart would have swelled with a renewed sense of pride, a triumphant surge, as he began to envision the ultimate public recognition, the pinnacle of royal favor. He would have pictured himself, adorned in the finest regalia, paraded through the streets, the envy of all. So, with a confident air, Haman began to lay out his suggestions for this unparalleled honor, describing a ceremony of truly magnificent proportions. He proposed that for the man whom the king delighted to honor, royal robes should be brought, robes that the king himself had worn, imbued with the very essence of royal authority and prestige. And a horse should be brought, one of the royal steeds, perhaps a magnificent Nisaean charger, famed for its strength and beauty, a horse upon which the king himself had ridden, its trappings adorned with gold and precious stones, a symbol of immense power and status. And then, he suggested, one of the king's most noble princes should array the honored man in these royal robes and lead him on the royal horse through the broad, bustling square of the city, proclaiming before him, for all to hear, for all to witness, "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." Haman's words would have painted a vivid picture, a grand spectacle of public acclamation, a scene of ultimate triumph and recognition, a dream of glory that he had undoubtedly harbored in the secret chambers of his own heart. He would have spoken with an almost breathless enthusiasm, his eyes perhaps gleaming with the imagined splendor of it all, completely oblivious to the true recipient of this proposed honor. The king, listening to Haman's elaborate suggestions, would have allowed him to finish, perhaps a subtle smile playing on his lips, a silent amusement at the Grand Vizier's self-absorption. Then, with a quiet authority that would have instantly shattered Haman's triumphant reverie, the king spoke, his voice calm, yet carrying the undeniable weight of command. He instructed Haman to take the robes and the horse, exactly as he had described, and to do all that he had suggested, not for himself, but for Mordecai the Jew, the very man Haman despised above all others, the man who sat at the king's gate, the man for whom Haman had just ordered a towering gallows to be built. And, the king added, with a chilling precision, Haman was to see to it that nothing was omitted from all that he had spoken. The words would have fallen upon Haman like a sudden, unexpected blow, a crushing weight that stole his breath, turning his triumphant anticipation into a chilling dread. The color would have drained from his face, his heart plummeting from the heights of arrogant pride to the depths of despair. The realization, slow and agonizing, would have dawned upon him. He, Haman, the Grand Vizier, the second most powerful man in the empire, was now commanded to bestow the highest public honor upon his sworn enemy, the very man he intended to hang. The bitter irony, the cruel twist of fate, would have been almost unbearable. With a heavy heart, his spirit utterly crushed, Haman would have been forced to obey the king's command. He would have gone, perhaps with a leaden step, to retrieve the royal robes, feeling their luxurious weight, their soft texture, knowing they were destined for Mordecai. He would have led the magnificent royal horse, its powerful muscles rippling beneath its silken trappings, through the palace grounds, the very symbol of his own imagined triumph, now a tool for his public humiliation. He would have found Mordecai, still seated at the king's gate, perhaps looking up with a quiet surprise as Haman approached, his face a mask of barely concealed fury and utter defeat. Haman would have then, with hands that perhaps trembled slightly, dressed Mordecai in the royal robes, the rich fabrics falling around him, transforming the humble gatekeeper into a figure of regal splendor. He would have then placed Mordecai upon the royal horse, lifting him onto the saddle, the very act of profound humiliation for Haman, a public acknowledgement of Mordecai's unexpected elevation. And then, with a voice that must have been thick with suppressed rage and shame, Haman would have been forced to lead the horse through the broad square of the city of Susa, proclaiming for all to hear, for all to witness, the very words he had so eagerly suggested for himself: "Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor." The sounds of the city, usually a comforting backdrop, would have become a cacophony of whispers and murmurs, the collective gasp of the onlookers, the sudden hush of disbelief, the slow dawning of understanding on their faces. The people of Susa, accustomed to the rigid hierarchies of the Persian court, would have watched in stunned silence, then perhaps a ripple of excited chatter, as they witnessed this extraordinary spectacle: Haman, the all-powerful Grand Vizier, leading Mordecai, the Jew, in a procession of unparalleled honor, a complete reversal of fortunes, a public spectacle of cosmic justice unfolding before their very eyes. Mordecai, perhaps maintaining a quiet dignity, would have ridden through the square, the weight of the royal robes, the unfamiliar height of the horse, the bewildering gaze of the crowd, all a testament to the unpredictable currents of fate. After this public display, this utterly humiliating ordeal, Haman, his face a picture of utter dejection, would have rushed home, his head covered in shame, seeking refuge from the prying eyes and whispered comments of the city. The grand house, which had earlier been a sanctuary of his pride, now felt like a prison of his humiliation. He would have recounted the entire, agonizing tale to his wife, Zeresh, and all his friends, perhaps his voice hoarse with despair, the bitter taste of defeat heavy on his tongue. He would have described how he, Haman, had been forced to honor Mordecai, the very man he intended to destroy, the very man for whom the gallows stood ready, a silent, mocking monument to his failed ambition. Zeresh and his wise men, who had so confidently advised him to build the gallows, now offered a different, more ominous counsel. Their words would have carried a chilling finality, a sense of impending doom. They said to Haman, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not overcome him but will surely fall before him." Their words, perhaps born of a deeper understanding of the mysterious ways of fate, or a superstitious fear of the Jewish people's resilience, would have sealed Haman's despair, confirming his worst fears, painting a bleak picture of his future. They recognized the pattern, the irreversible shift in power, the turning of the tide against him. While they were still speaking, perhaps their voices low and urgent, trying to make sense of this sudden and dramatic reversal, the king's eunuchs arrived, their presence a stark reminder of the king's unwavering authority, their faces perhaps impassive, yet their mission clear. They had come to escort Haman, to hasten him, to the second banquet that Queen Esther had prepared, the banquet that would finally reveal the true depth of her petition, the true nature of her distress, the banquet where the fate of her people, and indeed, the fate of Haman himself, would be irrevocably decided. Haman, with a heavy heart and a sense of foreboding that must have settled deep in his bones, would have been led away, the echoes of his friend's grim prophecy still ringing in his ears, walking towards a destiny he had so carelessly, so arrogantly, set in motion. The second banquet, held in the Queen's private chambers, would have been prepared with the same meticulous care as the first, yet the atmosphere would have been subtly different, charged with an unspoken tension, a quiet anticipation that hung in the air like the fragrant smoke from the incense burners. The soft glow of oil lamps would have cast a warm, intimate light upon the scene, illuminating the rich tapestries, the gleaming silver platters laden with delicacies, the jewel-toned wine shimmering in their goblets. Esther, dressed in her finest royal attire, would have been seated beside the king, her composure outwardly serene, yet her heart a quiet drumbeat beneath her breast, knowing that this was the moment, the culmination of her courage and her careful planning. Haman, seated opposite them, would have been a shadow of his former self, his earlier arrogance replaced by a palpable unease, his face perhaps pale, his eyes darting nervously, acutely aware of the shift in the king's favor, and the ominous words of his wife and friends. The king, perhaps sensing the gravity of the moment, or simply following the rhythm of their previous encounter, again asked Esther, his voice gentle, yet firm, "What is your petition, Queen Esther?" "It shall be granted you." "And what is your request?" "Even to half of my kingdom, it shall be performed." He was giving her the opening, the explicit permission to speak her truth, to lay bare the burden that weighed upon her. Esther, gathering her courage, her gaze meeting the king's, then spoke, her voice clear and steady, though perhaps with a tremor of emotion underlying her carefully chosen words. She began not with an accusation, but with a plea, a heartfelt appeal for her own life and the lives of her people. She revealed the terrible truth, the hidden danger that had been lurking beneath the surface of their peaceful lives, the insidious plot that threatened to annihilate her entire race. She explained that she and her people had been sold, not merely to be enslaved, but to be utterly destroyed, to be killed, and to perish. Her words would have painted a vivid, horrifying picture of the decree, the cold, bureaucratic efficiency of its execution, the unimaginable suffering it would unleash. She then added, with a quiet strength that underscored the depth of her conviction, that if they had merely been sold as male and female slaves, she would have remained silent, for such a misfortune, though grievous, would not have been reason enough to trouble the king. But this was different. This was an annihilation, a complete eradication, and the adversary, the one who had engineered this terrible decree, could not possibly compensate for the damage that would be done to the king's own interests, the loss of an entire people from his vast empire, a people who, though a minority, contributed to its richness and diversity. Her words were carefully chosen, appealing not only to the king's sense of justice and compassion, but also to his practical understanding of governance, the profound disruption and loss that such a decree would inflict upon his realm. The king, Ahasuerus, would have listened, his expression perhaps shifting from curiosity to shock, then to a growing anger as the full implications of Esther's words sank in. He had signed a decree, a royal edict, without fully understanding its true target, its devastating scope. He would have felt a surge of betrayal, a profound sense of having been manipulated, his royal authority used for such a heinous purpose. His gaze would have hardened, his voice now laced with a dangerous edge as he demanded to know, who is he, and where is he, who has dared to presume in his heart to do such a thing? The question hung in the air, heavy with the promise of swift and terrible retribution. Esther, knowing that this was the moment, the precise instant when the fate of her people, and Haman's, would be decided, did not hesitate. She pointed directly at Haman, her finger a stark accusation in the intimate setting of the banquet, and declared, "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." The story settles now, like dust after a long journey. Thank you for listening. If you find peace here, we would love to have you back. Tap subscribe so the next story finds you. Until then, sleep deeply and wake rested.